Hello, and welcome to Back Through the Lens, where two film school friends talk about movies through the haze of nostalgia, the good, the bad, and the ones that aren't quite how we remember them. I'm your host, Rachel, and with me is my co host, Joe. Today's topic is breakup movies.
Last week, love was in the air, but this week, some of us aren't so lucky. What helps mend your broken heart? Is it a good workout session? Maybe some loud, angry music? Or perhaps a certain movie that has gotten you through heartbreak before? We are going to be talking about films that have gotten us through our own romantic splits. This is our breakup episode.
Well, Joe, I'm really excited about our breakup episode, actually, because, well, you know this, but for everyone else, this idea of a movie we watched about breakups to get us through our own breakups. This was the initial seed of the idea for this podcast. My pick for breakup movies is Forgetting Sarah Marshall. I actually saw it for the first time while I was going through my own breakup. I was interning for a marketing company that did a lot of early screenings of movies, press screenings, and I just recently broke up with someone. Forgetting Sarah Marshall was on our schedule to start screening. I had to watch this movie 3 or 4 times in like a 2-week period after just getting dumped from
Jeez.
a longish relationship. So it really became special to me because it just mirrored so much of what I was feeling at the time. But also, I had to continuously watch it for work, which was good and bad at the time.
It's like rubbing salt in the wound, but also healing it back up at the same time.
I mean, it was really funny, at least.
Well, yeah, that's good. If it was a sad movie, that'd be pretty bad. Anyone out there doesn't know, Rachel and I are college friends, and I know for a fact I've been to some of your screenings. You have extra tickets. I'm trying
Mhm.
to remember if I know I saw this in theaters. I don't know if I saw it with you or like for one of your screenings. I think I might have been with my buddy, but I think you might have gotten us a pair of tickets.
It's possible. Like I said, there were a lot of screenings of this movie.
Hmm.
Like I said, at first it was kind of funny. Like, oh, okay, I'll watch this breakup movie, and at least it's humorous. Like, maybe sort of gets my mind off things because I'm working and I'm enjoying this movie. But then when you have to watch the breakup movie so many times in a row, you're like, wish I could stop thinking about breakups. Okay. So we'll just get into my pick then. Like I said, it's Forgetting Sarah Marshall, directed by Nicholas Stoller, released April 18th, 2008, rated R. For those of you who don't know, this movie is about a musician named Peter. He's dumped by his actress girlfriend, Sarah Marshall. He goes to Hawaii to try to get over her and clear his head and arrives to the resort to find Sarah is there with her new boyfriend.
I
Hijinks
mean,
ensue.
yeah, that's got to sting a little bit, right? It's like you
Yeah.
having to watch this movie 100 times for work.
Yeah.
I do remember that time period though, and seeing other films with the sneak peek pass, which was fun. If I haven't thanked you before, thanks for all the free movies back in the day.
You're very
Um,
welcome.
but I do remember this was kind of the big push with all of these actors from like Freaks and Geeks or Freaks and Geeks adjacent, and they were everywhere. What was big that year was this movie or anything with Jonah Hill, like Superbad or Seth Rogen. I personally was kind of getting worn out from all these movies. They're funny, but not fully funny. Not my cup of tea. I mean, I still laugh. They're fine. There's not my favorites, but they had like a movie every 3 months, and I was just kind of overdone with them. No offense, guys.
I think I know what you're talking about. I guess luckily for me, I wasn't part of the PR team for those movies. So for me, this one actually was a nice change of pace because usually we were screening pretty serious Oscar contender kind of stuff or children's movies. I remember thinking like, "Oh gosh, at least this is a comedy for once." Like
This is
maybe
right in the
something
middle.
light. Yeah. We open with Jason Segel's character, Peter. To your point, this kind of group of guys, I guess, that were in Freaks and Geeks together, were starting to break out into movies. I know Jason Segel wrote this. I always thought he was able to get it made at the time because he was getting bigger from How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, I think that time frame checks out. I've seen it here and there, but I didn't watch it when it was new and big. I
Mhm.
believe that was the second show after Freaks and Geeks that really kind of helped push him, further into his acting career, not just the casual stoner character, kind of a background bit in the other show.
Mhm. Yeah, I've only seen one episode of Freaks and Geeks, and I don't think I've seen How I Met Your Mother. So I really wasn't familiar with him before this movie.
And then he's in the other, they're always in each other's movies, kind of like we mentioned last week with Adam Sandler and his buddies. These
Mhm.
guys help each other out, even if they're in small little roles, just to kind of be around each other, which is cool. And I'd recognize him more for like those little roles until this is probably the first big role I saw him in.
Okay, so we open with Jason Segel's character Peter. I do like how they introduce us to him and to Sarah. We see things around the house, pictures of them together. I think it's Access Hollywood comes on, and for some reason, Peter is watching Access Hollywood about him and his girlfriend. Maybe it just happens to come on, but we learn from the little clip that Sarah, his girlfriend, played by Kristen Bell, is an actress on a cheesy popular cop drama, kind of like a Law and Order thing. And we learn that Peter is a composer and does music for the show.
Yeah, I like they kind of set up the relationship without showing much. It kind of reminds me of the opening of Rear Window. You get a lot of information just on like pictures throughout the house.
Hmm.
We kind of see him as a homebody. He's got a treadmill with a bunch of crap on it, like probably most of us do. If we have a treadmill, we just put our laundry on it.
Hmm.
He's eating cereal out of the world's biggest bowl and just kind of, being a little bit of a slouch, I guess.
Hmm.
But, he's comfortable and they show him playing the piano. So he's clearly still like working at home, not working from home, but he's working on stuff at home for his
Hmm.
job. So that's part of the gig being, a comfortable musician. I guess you could just chill around the house and play the piano whenever you want, which is, why not me?
Yeah.
Because I don't
Yeah.
play the
So,
piano. That's why not.
but you're right that we do get this impression of him being a homebody, maybe a little bit of a slob. And it's funny because that is something every time I watch this, I'm like, God, that bowl is big. Like as if I've never seen it before. Do you think that famous people watch themselves on shows like Access Hollywood the way that Peter was?
I would venture probably not.
I would feel like they don't as well.
I
But
think he was just
also,
watching TV and it came on. That's what I thought. But he didn't turn the channel. But I think he wasn't purposely watching Access Hollywood to see him and Sarah. I think he might have been watching TV, might have even been watching that show, and that was just a little clip that they had.
yeah, no, I agree. But plus, they had to set up our story somehow.
Right.
We end with a little clip of Russell Brand, who is Aldous Snow. They're showing a little bit of his band's music video. They're called Infant Sorrow, which is a very good fake band name. But I do really like this song. The whole song is him saying, "We've got to do something." And it's just a very good take on the kind of empty platitudes of, I guess, celebrities or artists that sometimes come up. But yeah, I like the kind of pseudo do-gooder thing. Their whole song is just called "We've Got to Do Something." What specifically? Who knows? I guess this was my introduction to Russell Brand too, because he wasn't really big in America, at least before this.
I think this was something that pushed him a little more forward. I knew
Mhm.
him somehow before this movie, and I can't remember as to why. Maybe a stand up? Did he do stand up? I feel like he was decently funny in this movie, but he kind of always annoyed me. It was always the same character. It was always for me. It was a little too much sometimes.
Mhm.
But that's what makes character actors big is their just ability to play that one role. And
Mhm.
if sometimes being annoying or the bad guy or whatever you want to call it, it works because it makes you want to not like him in the movie anyway. So he did a good
Yeah.
job. So
Yeah, I thought he was so funny in this, but I it did get old fast once I saw more of him and realized he's just the same thing over and over again. But okay, yes. I have in my notes. Peter is eating an enormous bowl of cereal. His girlfriend calls to say she's heading over. He lies and says he's eating a salad. We see him hurrying to clean up his place. Kristen Bell, his girlfriend Sarah, I guess I don't know if it's their house together or if it's his place.
I feel like it was his place
Yeah, probably.
because she's probably got a different spot closer to where she works, being actress. Although he works
Oh,
with her,
maybe.
but his place looks definitely his. It's very messy. It's got his stuff everywhere. The only thing of
Mhm.
hers we see are pictures. So like maybe pictures he
Oh,
put
yeah,
up.
good point. Mhm.
But then also when she calls and he like hurries to get ready, she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna stop by real quick." I feel like if that was a place you co lived with someone, you wouldn't call and say I'm coming over. It's you just come home.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. All good points. I think you have the right idea. You picked up on more context clues than I did. So Sarah shows up. Peter has just gotten out of the shower. He realizes pretty much right away that she's come to break up with him. And he drops his towel and is fully naked, bent over and crying. And just like a wounded animal, like bent over sobbing, but also completely nude. And that is one thing that I think stands out a little bit in this movie is like full frontal male nudity, not something we usually see, even in a comedy, male nudity in general.
Yeah,
Just,
usually just like HBO, Game of Thrones.
yeah. But yeah, I really felt like, especially for this being at least what I think is his, first real leading man role. This was kind of his movie. He wrote it. I felt like he was really putting himself out there as an actor.
Yeah, I can see that point though, where he literally put himself out there for the world to see. And you're right, we don't see a lot of full frontal nudity, and it's done just quickly enough to go like, oh my god, that just happened.
Yep.
And but it does make the scene funny because he refuses to get dressed
Mhm.
and he's
He
just
says, "If I
stopping.
put clothes on, it's over."
Right, and that line is hilarious because
Yeah.
he knows he has to walk to the bedroom, put clothes
Mhm.
on, and she might just by that point leave while his back
Yeah.
is turned. Who knows? Or they're gonna. It's hard to have a serious talk with a naked wet man out of the shower.
A
And
very
she's trying to,
large naked wet
yeah,
man.
she's trying to break up with him, and he's just sobbing
Mhm.
nakedly, I guess. So it just makes the scene funny, and but this worked because it made it so awkward.
I was just gonna say, I think it makes it even funnier too that Sarah is obviously very uncomfortable that this is how they're breaking up.
Yeah,
Like, I think for her, it's uncomfortable enough that he's, like, sad and crying, but then he's also doing it naked.
yeah.
The scene ends basically with her saying there's someone else and kinda runs away. We then see Peter in a bar with his stepbrother, played by Bill Hader.
Bill Hader is hilarious in this movie, and he's barely in it. I feel like
Mhm.
anytime I see him on screen, or as we'll see later, not even on screen, but you can hear him as a voiceover. I think he steals every scene he's in this movie, but maybe I'm just a
Mhm.
Bill Hader fan. His timing is great, and the way he delivers lines seems almost emotionless,
Mhm.
except for when he's yelling at Peter.
Right? He does yell at him at one point and says, "You're not my stepbrother, you're a step stranger." So, yeah, he does get animated sometimes, but I to your point, he is very, like, matter of fact, and I
Yeah,
think part of it is because we're supposed to get the impression that Bill Hader's character is very, like, settled into his marriage and his home life. I think his wife is pregnant. So, he's also, like, not really great at comforting Peter because they're just in such different situations.
yeah. I like that they're at a club, and
Mhm.
this is kind of atypical for movies that are rom com like or breakup movies. And usually the guys will take the broken hearted man to
Mhm.
like a club or strip club to meet other women to get their mind off the girl who just broke their heart.
Mhm.
So they're at this club, and Bill Hader's like, "Why are we here? We never hang out in places like this. It smells like a stripper's perfume." Which is a great line, but
Mhm.
it's funny because it's reverse. He doesn't want to be there. He didn't bring Peter to the club to make him feel better. Peter
Mhm.
is there trying to make himself feel better by doing
Mhm.
that, very atypical movie thing that I just mentioned. And
Yeah.
Hader's the one trying to talk him out of it, not into it.
Right. And, yeah, I have the impression that his brother's like, "I am married and I just wanna go home."
Yeah.
But yeah, we do see them trying to talk to girls. It's incredibly awkward. I mean, also they're probably drunk. But there's a little line where his brother tells him to get back to work on his Dracula musical. So a little bit of foreshadowing there.
Yep.
And is we go into a montage of Peter like hooking up with random girls, which is very silly. He's obviously just like very depressed and is desperately attempting to make himself feel better. I think he just like cries all the time, like
Yeah. Yeah. He's trying
during
to.
or after.
Yeah, he's trying to
Mhm.
forget Sarah Marshall, and it's making it worse almost.
Yep. And somewhere in there, we learned that he and Sarah were together for 5.5 years.
What I like about this is usually again in these kind of movies, it's just this, you know, gratuitous sex scenes. But this again is funny by how awkward all these encounters, and we see it on Peter's face. He doesn't even want to be doing this because none of these women are Sarah Marshall, which he clearly still has feelings for.
Right. Yeah. Of course. I do like the little scene of him totally freaking out at work. He's in a studio. They're playing him scenes from the cop show that Sarah's on because he has to, you know, write music that goes with the scenes. And he ends up getting so upset, like, seeing her on the screen that he just sort of attacks the screen, like, rips it with a music stand, but he also starts yelling something like, "You're fucking Billy Baldwin, aren't you?" Because
Yeah,
Billy Baldwin is her co-star on the show, and he knows there's some other guy that she's seen, but definitely puts his job in jeopardy.
yeah, like the guy who's recording Peter play is like trying to talk him away from the edge. He's like,
Mhm.
"Come on, man! I got concert tickets. We gotta do this."
Yeah, he's like, "I gotta
And
get
then
out
when
of
he
here."
when he flips out, he's like, "You're not getting paid for today."
Mhm. Yeah. So we go back to Peter's place. His stepbrother comes to visit. He's burning photos of Sarah on his stovetop, if
I
I
think
remember
so. Yeah,
correctly. And his brother confesses that he and his wife basically think Sarah's bitchy. But then Peter gets really mad and starts defending her. So he's obviously just a wreck. Like he doesn't know how he feels right now.
right. I like when he's burning the photos. You hear the "Nothing Compares to You" song in the background, and he's like
Hmm.
clearly has been crying for a while.
Yeah. And then later it goes to Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now by the Smiths.
He's feeling
So
a certain way. Okay,
yeah, he is definitely in his feelings. So his stepbrother suggests he gets out of town, go on a trip, kind of clear his head. And he says, okay, well, I'll go to Hawaii. Sarah was always talking about this resort in Hawaii. So I should go there. And obviously his stepbrother's like, maybe don't go to the resort in Hawaii that your ex-girlfriend always wanted to go to. And he says, oh, I can't go to Hawaii now because Sarah Marshall has heard of Hawaii.
I mean it's a good point. Like I'm sure Sarah Marshall's heard of lots of places, so you can't take that
Mhm.
off the menu. Why he would go to the exact resort she had mentioned? Obviously he's still feeling a certain way about her, but
Mhm.
maybe he's kind of shows that 5.5 years, they became almost one person. Like
Mhm.
relationships happen a lot, and maybe he's still not thinking for himself. I guess he's doing what Sarah Marshall would have wanted to do.
I do really like how this scene ends. He goes to delete photos of him and Sarah off his computer, and his stepbrother is like, "Oh, you're not really deleting them." And Peter says something like, "Well, I want to keep some of them just in case we get back together." And his stepbrother's like, basically like, "No, you have to rip the Band-Aid off," and he permanently deletes them while Peter's, like, holding him back and screaming at him, and then when they finally delete, he just yells out, like, this huge, like, "No!" And I felt that so hard because there is that point when you are first broken up where you're like, "Well, is it, like, for real broken up? Because like, what if I delete all this stuff and then we get back together, and then I have, like,
Right.
nothing of our first however long of our relationship. And when do you decide to really get rid of all that stuff? And questions that I think also are very generational because I don't know. I don't think until maybe you and I were in college, we really had to think about anything like, "Oh, I'm not with this person anymore. I guess I should delete all the photos of us off of Facebook or whatever."
Right, yeah. It was just the physical, which he was getting rid of anyways. He was burning pictures.
The physical pictures, yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny he could do that, but it was hard for him to empty his trash on his computer.
I assume he had those physical pictures backed up somewhere like everyone else does. We go from Peter just giving this horrible, like, scream, quickly cut to Hawaii. We see a newlywed couple checking in ahead of Peter, and they're, like, very awkward and also kinda all over each other, and we might see them again throughout the movie.
Yeah, you ever notice that when you're feeling miserable about love, you see it everywhere else? Everyone's happy.
Yeah.
That's
Mhm.
exactly what this scene is, I think.
Yeah, that's a good
And
point.
but it's funny because he sees that through his heartbroken point of view eyes, and of course, just like this newlywed being all romantic with each other, and rightfully so. You see more of it at the front desk with Rachel. The newlywed husband is very awkward with his his wife who's all over him, and
Mhm.
there's some vibes there, and we will see them later. And it's funny because he's apparently really religious and doesn't want to be as physical with his new wife as she wants to be with him. And that
Mhm.
joke gets played, again and again, but it gets funnier and funnier.
I do always think of, and this is jumping ahead a bit, but when this newlywed husband is trying to explain all that to Russell Brand's character, and he says that they never slept together before they got married, and Russell Brand says, "Oh, right, because of God and stuff."
Yeah.
That
He
is
does
some.
have some good lines, though, I will say, Russell Brand.
Yes, definitely. But we're introduced to Mila Kunis's character Rachel, who's working the front desk at this resort. Peter steps up to the desk, tells her he doesn't have a reservation. I do love when she says this was a bold choice. While they're having this interaction, Peter looks out the window and happens to see Sarah walking outside. And I love this exchange where Rachel says, "Oh yeah, it's Sarah Marshall from Crime Scene. Like people are excited she's here," and kind of trying to make it very lighthearted. And Peter says, "She's my ex-girlfriend. We broke up 3 weeks ago." And he's like trying to hide himself unsuccessfully. Also, he's very tall, which we've touched on too.
Yeah. And
Um,
at the front desk where everyone has to go.
mhm.
I
And
like he's got this like horrible like Hawaiianish shirt, and
yeah.
Rachel's trying to help him out. It's like, looks sexy. Unbutton this button. And he unbuttons it. He goes, "Is this good?" "Oh, it's awful. Button it back up."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and he says something like, "I wish I wasn't wearing this awful shirt," or something.
Yeah.
Yes, I just love that he's going through this awful moment that I'm sure lots of people can relate to, running into your ex, especially fresh off of a breakup, and he's also narrating it all to this front desk attendant that he's just
Hmm.
met. Sarah sees him, asks what he's doing there, and he says, "I came here to murder you." He says it in a very joking way, but obviously is trying to play it off like he's not as awkward as he feels, because he realizes this is weird too.
Oh yeah.
Peter starts to say that this must be fate because they're both at the same resort, as in, the stars aligning to bring them back together. And then Aldous Snow walks over to Sarah. I think he smacks her butt. He does something that makes it very obvious that he's here with Sarah and that they're a couple.
I can't remember. I just got distracted with the scene because he comes into the resort to the front desk because he's got one flip flop in his hand, and he asks
Mhm.
Rachel, "Have you seen my other shoe? It looks like this, but the opposite." And it goes on for a little while how it's just a
Mhm.
mirror image, how shoes work. Everyone knows how shoes work. There's usually two,
Right? Yeah.
but it's just this weird conversation he's having about, "I need my other shoe. It looks like this but different," and he just kind of beats that point in, and it's like, okay,
Mhm.
one of
Yeah.
those. This movie's all about awkward conversations, and it's pretty good.
Yep. Except that Aldous probably does not think of himself as awkward at all,
No,
right?
I wouldn't think he thinks himself of that. I just think his boldness and weirdness makes
Oh,
other
yeah.
people feel awkward.
Mhm.
He doesn't, but he makes other people feel that way. I felt.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. So Rachel interrupts this whole exchange and tells Peter that she was able to book this suite for him. Like she's obviously taking pity on him in this situation. Sarah and Aldous leave. I don't remember how they end this, but they leave the scene. And Peter says something to Rachel like, "I really appreciate you doing that, but I can't afford that suite." And she says, "No one can. It's for like Oprah or Celine Dion." But Rachel says, "Sarah's here with some guy already. It's kind of messed up." And Peter's like, "Yeah, right." Somehow walking to this suite, though, he ends up outside Sarah's room with Aldous. Their rooms are kind of like open to the beach. Like they have very open patios in the back of the rooms, if that makes sense. So Sarah and Aldous have like this big open door to the outside. They can hear Peter kind of like walking by, and his stepbrother is yelling to him through the phone that he needs to leave right now because he cannot be at the same vacation resort as Sarah.
Yeah, I think he's actually was following them, and he doesn't know why because he's on the phone with was it
Oh, right.
Brian is his name, I think. And he's like, "Why are you following him?" He's like, "I don't know." He's like, "Well, stop, just stop." He's like, "I can't." And then
Yeah,
he's like,
you're
"I see
right.
their room. I'm gonna go say hi." And then he pulls the phone away from his face, and you can hear Bill Hader just shouting at him, "Go away! Turn around!"
Yeah.
And they obviously can hear him too, and it makes it even more awkward. He's like, "Hi guys," and you hear Hader yelling at him to leave, and Sarah Marshall doesn't want him there.
I love how awkward he is, but in a totally realistic way that like because breakups are awkward. It is going to be awkward when you run into each other. It's especially going to be awkward if for some reason you're sharing the same public space together. And I think it's honest that Peter's like, "I don't know. I just like need to see what they're doing, but also I shouldn't be doing this." And, his stepbrother obviously is like pulling his hair out over the phone.
Yeah,
But I also like too that Peter is such like a big guy, and I feel like he spends quite a bit of the movie trying to be sort of like chill and stealthy, and he's just like physically too big to make it work, but also it makes it almost even more awkward because like he's so tall and like so easy to spot, and
hmm
there's no way he could get away with all this like sneaking. Peter ends up in his suite watching Sarah's show, her crime show. He's crying on the balcony. Rachel has to call up to his room saying that people have been reported a woman crying hysterically on his floor.
no, I think it's the floor above me.
Yeah, she's like, "There is no floor above you."
I'll keep it down.
We cut to a restaurant on the resort. Jonah Hill is a host.
Of course he is.
Yeah, of course he is. Um, and I do remember thinking when I saw this, like, man, this guy's everywhere because it was when like he was breaking out really big. He's confused that Peter is just by himself, just really hammering that home that Peter is single and alone.
Yeah,
um,
with assuming what's like a couple's resort.
yeah, that's a good point. It is very much like a romantic, like couples kind of thing. But he seats Peter in full view of Sarah and Aldous. Aldous invites Peter to join them. Sarah is not thrilled about this, and I think Aldous just thinks he's being nice.
I think so. He doesn't probably believe that exes mean anything, and we'll find that
Mhm.
out later. He doesn't really have a lot of romantic ties to women in general, or just to people.
Mhm.
He does what he wants. He's a free spirit type of person, which is fine.
Mhm.
And because of that, he doesn't seem to understand how awkward it is for Peter to be invited to his table with his ex
Mhm.
girlfriend sitting there.
Right. Like I think you're right. Like he definitely gives off hippie, like open relationship kind of
Yeah,
vibes. Like
yeah.
everyone just love everyone. We see that Jonah Hill's character is obviously obsessed with Aldous, like it's his favorite band or he's his favorite musician or something. Toward the end of the scene, Peter leaves the table and Sarah goes to talk to him. They're talking without Aldous there. And he says to Sarah, "Looks like Aldous used a lot of needles, so thank you for dating him after me."
Yeah, well, Yeah, because they were talking about when he sits at the table with them, he offers him a drink. Jonah Hill does, and he shows him his tattoo of 7 years sobriety. And I don't think he was talking about the needles as far as tattoos go, because Aldous mentions if he has like one sip of wine, he'll be sucking guys off for a bump or something like that. So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
implication is he is sober because he was a
He-
big partier at
yes,
one
like
point.
he needs to be sober, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that whole conversation. We cut to Peter at the resort bar getting drunk. He's obviously pretty far gone. He starts pretending he's different characters from Sex and the City. I don't know if you notice when he says, "I'm a Miranda," Miranda from Sex and the City walks behind him.
I did not
It's
notice.
it's very quick. Yeah, I don't know why Cynthia Nixon was around for this for, like, an extremely quick cameo, but sure. We see him talking to the groom from that newlywed couple earlier. The groom says that his wife is complicated like the Da Vinci Code.
uh
And
yes.
I love that too because, like, that's such a moment in time where the Da Vinci Code was so popular.
Right.
We learn that Peter doesn't really like his job much because he doesn't think it's real music, just doing a score for this TV show. And we did see a little bit when he was trying to record that earlier scene where he was really upset. The guy says something like, dark and ominous, like the usual. So he's probably just doing the same kind of thing over and over again. And he says, "I'm no Aldous Snow, I guess." And obviously, like feeling down in the dumps because Sarah left him for a quote unquote real musician, more of
Yeah,
like a
he's
rock
rock
star, right?
star. Yeah.
Yeah. He kind of makes friends with the bartender. I can't remember his name, but I like when the bartender says he moved there from South Central LA and now he knows all different kinds of fish. Like he can name a fish for every letter of the alphabet. And he just like names all these fish like really fast and goes, "Yeah, bitch."
He's very proud.
Yeah. Cut to Peter back in his room playing the theme from the Muppet Show on a piano. He went on later to do the newer Muppet movies. Uh, and also a little bit of foreshadowing with the puppets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I It's got to be a happy coincidence. Not that he was playing the Muppet Show theme and then later he's doing the puppeteering for the Dracula musical,
Mhm.
but it's got to be a coincidental foreshadowing on his career because there's no way that was planned out. Like, I'm going to play the
Oh,
Muppet
yeah.
theme and now I'm going to play with Muppets in real life.
Oh, no, exactly.
That's It's pretty funny though.
I remember reading some interview with him where he had said he was always a big fan of the Muppets, and he was actually working on this Dracula musical in real life, but then it got folded into Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Nice.
Um, so it was something he was genuinely working on, and he does genuinely like puppets because of the Muppets. Yeah, it's so funny too that when we first started this episode, I forgot about him doing the Muppet movies. It's literally in my notes.
Hmm.
But anyway.
Next scene, he's at breakfast, little breakfast buffet, and he's just
Mhm.
still obviously downtrodden. And
Mhm.
this waiter kind of hooks him up. He's like, "What do you want to drink?" And he asks for like orange juice and rum, and he brings him a little mini, hotel bottle of rum. He's like,
Mhm.
I hooked you up there," and he gave him like a couple extra bottles. And it's the
Mhm.
first time we see someone like being, no, maybe not the first time because Rachel's kind of nice to him, but we don't see a lot
Mhm.
of her yet. But
Mhm.
someone else on the island kind of treating him more like a person and not avoiding him and making it
Mhm.
awkward for him, and he looks genuinely happy. Peter does,
Mhm. Yeah,
not just because he's getting
he's
booze for
touched.
breakfast either.
Yeah.
Also, no judgment. It's vacation. You're on a resort.
Yeah,
Time doesn't
exactly.
exist. Yeah.
Time doesn't exist. So Peter goes to take surf lessons with Paul Rudd. Paul Rudd might be like my favorite character in this whole movie. His name is Chuck, but he changed it to something else because Chuck is his mainland name.
Kunu is his name.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Peter goes, "What's that stand for?" "Oh, it's Hawaiian for Chuck."
Yeah.
So there you go.
Peter's like explaining his situation to Kunu, and Kunu says, "Well, there's only one cure for that: weed. You got any?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
He was trying to buy weed from Peter, not sell it,
yes.
as you would
um,
assume he was trying to do.
they he's trying to teach Peter how to stand up on a surfboard before they go in the water. And I love how he's telling Peter to pop up, and he does. And he goes, "No, too fast, do less." do less. And Peter gets so confused that he eventually just stops trying to stand up. And Kunu goes, "Well, now you're just not even moving."
Yeah.
He just has no idea what to do. They decide to go try it in the water, and Kunu says something like, "It's a beautiful day." And he says, "The weather outside is weather." My husband and I say this all the time. I actually, I think I forgot for a while that that quote came from this movie because we
Mm,
say it so much, and I don't know, this movie, I saw it for the first time, before I was even, married or anything, and I've been with my husband for almost 15 years now. It's feels like a whole lifetime ago.
yeah, I like that Kunu is kind of also hippie-esque, stoner-esque, and he's
Mhm.
just, "I don't have a watch anymore ever since I came to the island." Peter's like, "Oh, yeah?" He's like, "Well, it's on my phone now." So it's like the whole conversation about his name not being Chuck, but it's still Chuck. It's just a
Yeah.
different language. So he's, like, trying to have island vibes, but still very much not. His explanation of how to pop up on the board is confusing because he just is trying, I think, maybe too hard to be, like, chilled out and broing out on the beach,
Mhm.
and that comes up here and there. In I think it's kind of funny.
Yeah, he says all these things that sound, very deep at first, and then it's just like, "Oh, no. I stopped wearing a watch because my phone's clocked now." Like,
Right? Yeah.
um, and he ends this with saying to Peter, "If you're attacked by a shark, are you just gonna give up surfing?" Peter says, "Probably."
Yeah. Yeah. He's trying to help Peter through this breakup and be motivated in life, and it didn't work out.
Yeah, it did not work out at all.
So after the Kuno scene, he's
Mhm.
back in his room and he's talking to Brian again, kind of like a Zoom call almost. And Brian's just
But,
sitting there and they're
before
talking.
Zoom.
Yeah, it's before Zoom. Or, I mean, Zoom might have been around forever, but before Zoom was useful and we knew about it.
Skype, maybe?
Sure. Video
Yeah.
call,
Video call,
2008
yeah.
video call,
Yeah.
probably Teams, who knows. And you're just kind of talking through what's going on, and Brian's still trying to be a good stepbrother, make him feel good about just being in the situation where he's at the resort with Sarah Marshall. And then all of a sudden, he's just switching the backgrounds, as you can do in the
Yeah,
Zoom,
yeah.
and it's Hawaii, and he's like, "Aloha, bitches." And Peter's like, "This isn't helping me." And he's also Brian, that is also making fun of Peter's hat, and then you
Mhm,
hear Liz off screen, and Peter gets mad because he thought it was a private conversation. Him and
mhm.
Brian, even though they weren't talking about anything private, it's just being emotional, and Brian's still trying to give him tough love.
Well, and
He's like, "Is that Liz there?" And
Liz is
he's like,
also giving him, really stupid, married couple advice.
"Right,"
Yeah.
from off screen, and
Mhm.
then Brian's like, "Oh, she's not here." It's like, "Hi, Liz," and she comes on screen like, "Hi," and like, "Well, you ruined that for me."
Yep, but then, Peter goes to a 4th of July celebration at the resort. Okay, I assume Sarah and Aldous are there because of the way my notes are written, but the waiter who is obsessed with Aldous, Jonah Hill, calls him up to perform a song, and when Aldous gets on the stage, he says, "What an eccentric and confident young man."
Then he
Peter
plays that very that song that probably Peter doesn't want to hear.
Oh,
The
yeah.
inside of yeah, he starts
He's
singing "Inside of You,"
Yep,
which is
and
well,
dedicates it to Sarah Marshall.
you could probably figure out what that means.
Mhm. Is this the part where he's singing and he's, bent over and his knees are or his legs are out at, 90-degree, angles? It's just the way he moves his body, isn't human.
Right, it's like a little
And I
crab person.
and it might also be because he's, very lanky and,
Mm,
skinny, but when I think of Russell Brand, that's how I picture him, doing that move, and I know it's, during a part where he's singing a song, and I couldn't remember if it was this song or, in his music video or whatever. Um,
it probably was this song. He does a lot of weird movement and gyrations.
yeah. You know what I'm talking about though, right?
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
so uncomfortable. Um,
It's so uncomfortable, in fact, that Peter, rightfully so, walks away.
Yeah.
Yeah, he walks away and he,
He's like, "I'm done."
sees one of the workers on the island, and he kind of is slowly befriending people because he's alone.
He's
And I just,
befriending, employees of the hotel,
yeah, because they see him all the
specifically.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sort of the newlywed whatever the character's
Oh, that
name is. We're just
newlywed
calling them,
couple, yeah.
yeah, well, the husband. I
Mhm.
just like when he's talking to one of the employees. He's like, "You need to relax," and he pulls a beer out of his pocket and gives
Yeah.
it to Peter. Just a little
Yeah.
good old fashioned pocket beer. Can't go wrong with
Yep.
a pocket beer.
Well, and I also think all the hotel employees at this point know that he's like he just got dumped, but then his ex is here with a new guy, and also his ex and the new guy are both celebrities.
Hmm.
So I think they're kind of taking pity on him a little. But to your point, Peter and his new hotel employee friend go to get the pig ready for the luau. The hotel employee does not specify that the pig is still alive at this point. So we
Yeah,
cut to a really distressing scene of Peter trying to like slaughter the pig for the luau. I don't know why they thought the new guys should do it. But Peter's like chasing this pig around a room screaming, "I'm sorry." And then,
yeah,
yeah, cut to them carrying the pig over to the hotel to prep it or whatever, and Peter's crying.
yeah. And the guy's like, "You don't have to cry anymore. He's already dead." He's like, "I'm not crying."
So at the luau, Peter eventually asks Rachel out. I feel like we've sort of been building up to this a little bit, like they've been running into each other, but not too much, like you said. They go hang out at a beach party. Rachel explains to Peter that she moved to Hawaii for a guy. And you can tell he's trying to kind of give her some advice about, well, you could do anything now because, you're not stuck here because of some guy. You could like go back to, I don't know, wherever she moved from. You could go back to school, whatever. And she's like, I really like my life. I like being on the island and working at the hotel. And, I feel like she does get a little slightly offended that there's an insinuation that she should not be happy with that kind of a life, that she's
Yeah, it
quote
comes up a
unquote
couple
just
times.
working at the hotel. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone needs to
Um,
work somewhere, so why not work on an island?
Right, yeah. It's funny because we went to Hawaii last year for a wedding, and when we were returning our rental car at the airport, my husband said to an employee there that, they have a really beautiful island. We were on Kauai, and the woman's like, "Yep, that's why I moved here." She's
Yeah,
like, "I work at a car rental place, but I get to live here." And it's like, you know what? Yeah, good for you.
yeah. Doesn't have to clean salt off the cars.
Yeah, that's true. But Peter then admits that he hates writing music for a TV show. She tells him to do something about it, and he starts telling her about his Dracula rock opera. He says he wanted to write about Dracula because he smothers human women when he gets too close to them, and that he can relate to that.
As a guy who doesn't write music for a TV show, I would totally do that job. But I get if that is your job and you want to do something more creative, how that would kind of, I guess, dampen his spirits.
Hmm.
But it is funny how I mean, I personally think Peter has a cool job, and I think that Rachel has a cool job, and they are just kind of. Rachel's not complaining about it, but like you said, she got a little offended that Peter suggests maybe this isn't the life she should be living, and
Hmm.
he doesn't really point the finger to himself until someone makes him.
Yeah.
But she's like, "I'm fine here, but you're not fine. You're here to get away. What do you
Hmm.
want to do?" He's
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, you're right."
So during this conversation, Rachel sees her ex on the beach, the one that she moved to Hawaii for. I love how she runs at him and just immediately like loses all her cool. Like this whole movie, Rachel's been almost like one step ahead of Peter. She's been like really chill, really cool, like really quick on her feet. And then when she sees her ex, she's like immediately running at him. He says something like he's king of this beach. And she's like, "You're king of what? The idiots?" In that moment, I related to her so hard because like I'm the kind of person that would never think of a good comeback until like days later. So she's obviously like flustered and just yelling whatever comes to mind. And it's like not smart or like a good dig or anything. Peter thinks he has an in because the friend with her ex is the guy at the hotel bar. Who like gave him the extra rum that you had mentioned earlier.
Yeah, for breakfast
And the guy says something like that's the hotel, this is the streets now, or something like that,
and punches him.
and punches him. Yeah. So Peter ends up dragging Rachel away from this situation because it's obviously not going to go well. They end up at a restaurant, and he tells Rachel she was like one of those girls from Flavor of Love.
Yeah, she gets real catty real quick. Totally different
Mhm.
person. And it's really the only time in the movie we see her like this.
Yeah, if Flavor of Love also a very timely reference,
Hmm.
much like the Da
Yeah.
Vinci Code.
Time capsule of a movie. He offers the buyer a drink, I think.
That's what it is, yeah, because I have the line
Hmm.
where she says to Peter, "You don't have to dote on me, I'm not that kind of girl." I dislike this a little bit because I feel like they're trying too hard to set up that Rachel is, like, a different kind of girl than Sarah, or that she's, like,
Right.
the not that kind of girl. Like, it always makes me think of the concept of the cool girl from Gone Girl, if you're familiar with that whole
Yeah.
thing.
Or just
Yeah.
any movie situation like this where there's the girl, then there's the cool girl.
Yeah, or, like, the better
Um,
girl, yeah.
and I kind of felt bad. I agree. I didn't really like that line either because I feel like Peter was just trying to be nice. I don't think he was trying to
Mhm.
dote on her yet. I don't think
Yeah.
he even knows he has feelings for her yet.
Yeah.
I think he was just she just ran into her ex and flipped out and was probably not, the happiest person at the moment. I think he was just trying to be
Mhm.
chill and buy her a drink. Just to, hey man, that's
Yeah, cheer her
a
up and, like
nice
mhm.
gesture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would not to be very, like to really pick this apart, I wouldn't really see that as doting as well. But then they go into a flashback of him holding Sarah's purse constantly on the red carpet because, in contrast, he, I guess, had to dote on Sarah all the time. Um, like, again, the specifics of this don't really work for either of us, I think, but I do like the idea that he's starting to realize that maybe his relationship with Sarah wasn't perfect, or that there were things that could have been better, that maybe things there are things that in a relationship with someone else wouldn't exist to frustrate him.
Yeah, and with these quick montage of him doting on Sarah Marshall, it's a little bit similar to when he was watching Access Hollywood. Only instead of now them being on the red carpet together and obviously there was a voiceover talking about the couple, we see what's like really happening, and all the photographers are telling like Sasquatch and Gigantor or all these mean names to a tall man to get out of the shot, and he's just in the background holding her purse or her shoes or just basically waiting for her to stop getting all the attention,
Mhm, mhm.
and so they can go do something as a couple, and
Oh,
he looks
right.
miserable.
Yes. Which also, like, to be a kind of fair to Sarah isn't exactly her fault, like, that's kinda part of her job. So Peter leaves to use the bathroom, and in the bathroom of this bar, there's a bunch of photos of topless women, and he realizes that one of them is Rachel. He asks her about it when he gets back, and she's like, "Yeah, I hate it. Her boyfriend made her do it." And now the owner of the bar refuses to take it down. He gives her some, like, bullshit answer, like it messes up the balance of the wall, like it's an art installation, and Peter offers to get it down for her, and she says, "Oh, no, he would kill you." And
Like literally kill you.
yeah, like, literally, yeah, and, like, the bartender's kinda this big scary guy. So then immediately, Peter is surprised by the band calling him up to sing a song from his Dracula musical, and it turns out that Rachel has surprised Peter by, setting this up while he was gone. I love the way, like, no one's clapping, no one's making any kind of noise, and Peter's, like, stunned, doesn't know what to do, and she just goes, "Yeah, Peter!" And it's totally quiet bar, and she's, like, clapping, and this is how I feel about myself when I'm at, like, my child's functions, and I'm like, "Yeah, my kid!" Like,
Well,
um,
yeah, she's trying to make him feel better.
I know, but I love that she keeps yelling random things, like, he's slowly making his way up there, like, kinda collecting himself, and she's like, "Yeah, Dracula!" And he offers to, like, sing a different song, and she's like, "Dracula musical!"
Yeah, she's really strong arming him to do this
Yeah.
Dracula song that's probably not even fleshed out yet.
Right, yeah, that's the thing too, is, like, where everyone's lucky he's in a position that he has, like, an entire song from the musical he could sing right now,
Right.
but, I mean, I enjoy his Dracula song. I like a good riff on existing IP, I don't know. I enjoy the Dracula musical in general. I mean, it's better in the end because 'cause they're puppets. I love, like, Peter, is doing, like, the Dracula voice with the heavy accent, and when he laughs, he still has, like, a heavy Dracula accent. I love the one guy in the crowd who, like, genuinely laughs at it, and his wife shoots him a look like he's the biggest idiot. I remember screening this and the end of the Dracula song where he's saying "die" over and over again and then says, "I can't," because he's a vampire. The whole theater thought that was so funny, and so that always makes me laugh because I think of everyone else reacting to it. But again, Rachel is the only one cheering for him at first, but I
Hmm.
appreciate her enthusiasm for him.
After the bar scene, Rachel is dropping Peter off at the hotel on her way home, and they had a good time together. Peter goes in for a kiss. Whoops, because
Yeah.
Rachel's like, "Nah, this is not what's happening right now."
Mhm.
So Peter leaves. He's like, they try to play it chill, and Rachel seems slightly upset, but I think not for not for now. I don't think she wants this relationship yet. I think she just feels bad that she might have led Peter on accident. It's kind of the
Yeah, and,
vibe I
like, I
got.
think frustrated that he tried to go in for a kiss, like, frustrated that he thinks it's something more than she
Hmm.
does. Yeah.
And then he's at the bar talking to the bartender who knows all the fish names.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, I just had a date with Rachel." And he's like, "No, you didn't. That's just what she does. It's customer service." He's like, "No, no, I definitely know it's a date." And he says, "Bet you think strippers like you too."
Yeah.
It's like, oof, ouch.
Yep. So, we cut to Sarah getting news that her show has been canceled. She talks to Aldous about it, and he says, "Well, that's good because that's what you wanted." And she says, "Yeah, I could transition into film." And this turns into Aldous talking about how he's going on tour for 18 months, and apparently he never told her. So she starts to realize, I think, that this isn't like the committed relationship maybe she thought it was. And he says, "Well, you can come with me." And she's like, "Well, I can't. I'm a working actress." He says, "Not anymore. You're an unemployed actress."
Yeah,
I'm sorry. That was
ouch.
your note.
That's fine.
Okay.
I just think she is shocked. I mean, she was in a relationship with Peter for 5.5 years,
Hmm.
and seemingly just was with all this pretty quickly, right?
Hmm.
But there's a difference. She had someone that literally worked with her on the show versus
Hmm.
this rock star who travels the world. I don't know what she was expecting. That's kind of shame on her for his lifestyle. He's literally a rock star. This is his job.
Hmm.
So they're both kind of putting themselves first instead of the relationship. Where Sarah Marshall doesn't want to travel the world because she's not anymore a working actress, but she's trying to be a working actress in Hollywood, and Aldous Snow is a rock star, and he travels and goes on tour. That's how he makes his money. So for either one of them to think the other one would stay or leave with them is kind of selfish.
But still, that you're gonna be gone for 18 months, you don't even mention it too.
Well, right, there's that as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and he goes on and on about you can come with me. You could be the queen of the groupies, the queen of the sorrow suckers. Oh, yeah, I don't think she wants to do any of that.
Jonah Hill shows up and brings them cake, I think. He calls them Mr. and Mrs. Snow and says he has complimentary cake from the hotel. It's definitely not from me personally.
Right.
And then he slips Aldous his demo.
Hmm.
Um, Sarah, we assume, like, leaves the conversation because this is not how she wanted it to go. Peter runs into her at the hotel bar and she tells him that Crime Scene, their show, was canceled. She admits to Peter that she's scared about this because she doesn't know what's next and worried about being able to get more roles, I think aging in Hollywood and stuff like that. And they're able to, joke around about this stuff.
Yeah. What I like too is this is one of many scenes with Peter and Sarah where Peter just like tells Sarah to cut the shit. Just can you just talk to me? Like just be honest. It was like
Mhm.
the breakup scene, this scene it comes in later, and she tears down the wall and is very honest with Peter because she thought it was. Like, she told him it's fine. I wanted this anyways. I want to be in movies, and he's like, no, cut the shit. And that's when she's like, oh, I'm so scared. Like she's can be honest with
Mhm.
Peter, and I think
Mhm.
between the last conversation with Aldous and not knowing he was on tour and promoting her of Queen of the Groupies, and then this conversation with Peter and being able to be honest, she is now starting to realize she might have made a mistake.
Mhm. And
She
that's
even like
funny.
grabs his hand, like when
Mhm.
they're like joking and comforting each other. She kind of not quite a hand holding situation, but kind of at the same time. She
Mhm.
like reaches over the table and just like squeezes his hand very lightly.
Mhm. And I think she says something like, you're always able to make me feel better about things." Um, but then he flashes back to times when she wasn't supportive of his Dracula musical, and it's, like, so obvious that she doesn't like it, and she says something like, "Well, maybe I just don't get it," and she's like, "Please don't play it again."
Right? Yeah.
And he's obviously comparing it to, like, how Rachel to be fair, Rachel had no idea what it was like. She had never heard it before, but she still was, like, trying to be encouraging at the bar.
I even think it was more of just the contrast of how supportive Peter was to Sarah and not
Mhm.
returned.
Yes, that too.
They're
Yeah.
in the hotel lobby, Peter and Rachel, and I forget the character's name, but one of the other hotel workers,
Mhm.
and they're like, "We're gonna go for a hike." He's like, "Oh, come on, you should go snorkeling with me." They're like, "Why?" He's like, "It's sea turtle fucking season, man. They fuck for hours." They're like, "We're just gonna go for a walk, I think." He's like, "No
Mhm.
one wants to go snorkeling with me."
Yeah, I
That poor
totally
guy.
forgot about that part. Um,
So
but yeah,
random. I loved it.
we do see Rachel and Peter going on a hike, and I guess it was, like, a tougher hike than he realized, and he says, "I've never been covered in this much sweat before. It's like I have a fever."
Right. Well, they are also in Hawaii. It's
Mhm.
notoriously warm there.
Yeah. But it's funny too because this is supposedly, like, a strenuous, like, uphill hike, and Rachel's just wearing short shorts.
I was more concerned with the fact they're both wearing flip flops on a hike. Short
That too,
shorts,
yeah.
fine. They're tropical, lovely weather, and it's hot, so maybe she
Mhm.
doesn't want to be so sweaty like
I
Peter
get
and his
that.
fever. But it's the flip flops. So I was like, it's not; those are not hiking shoes, sir and madam.
Mhm. Yeah,
Gonna roll an ankle.
yeah. But Rachel asks him if he's going to finish his Dracula musical now the show is done, and somehow this leads to her encouraging him to jump off this cliff that they're on top of, like, into the ocean. Maybe something about taking risks, that
Yeah,
kind of
it's
thing.
a
Yeah.
very physical version of a metaphor. You
Yep,
just got
there
to
you go.
do it. And then, well, he also kind of, again, they get real close and he's starting to lean in for a kiss and she
Mhm.
just jumps off the cliff.
Yep. After they had been talking about it, but
Yeah.
I love as soon as she jumps, he goes, "Oh god, I made her kill herself."
Yeah.
Uh, as if, kissing him would be such a horrible thing.
Right.
Uh, so, uh, she's in the water and she's like, "Oh my god, can't believe I just did that. That was great. Like, you need to do it." And he does this, like, awkward cartwheel, like, over the edge. Like, he doesn't really commit to jumping. So he ends up kinda, like, sliding down the side, and then he's just, like, grabbing onto, plants and rocks because he's scared,
Hmm.
and he ends up in a situation where he can't just let go and drop straight down because he'll fall into the rocks
Yeah.
below in the water, and he needed to kinda commit and jump out the way Rachel did. But I remember him being just like, "Oh, okay, I'll just, like, let go. That's easy, right?" She's like, "No, no, no. You'll fall on the rocks and die." And he's like, "Oh, great."
Right. Yeah.
Uh, but he eventually manages to, like, launch himself off of the cliffside and fall into the water safely, I guess, and this is when they finally end up kissing.
Yeah. Near death will do that to people sometimes, I guess.
Mhm. This is, my husband has a theory with this on The Bachelor and Bachelorette where whoever does the most, like, scary date with the lead, like, they form an emotional bond because 'cause they've overcome this big fear together, like bungee jumping or whatever, and that's usually who they pick.
Hmm.
And so far, he's right most of the time.
Nice.
Yep. It was a
Yeah.
good observation.
Kind of worked here, I suppose.
Mhm. So, we see that Peter has to move out of his suite, because apparently Dakota Fanning needs it.
Hmm.
And I thought this was so funny because in the beginning they say it's only for people like Oprah or Celine Dion. Like, don't really think of Dakota Fanning on that level. No offense to Dakota Fanning. We cut to Sarah going to talk to Rachel at the front desk, I think under the guise of asking for a good sushi restaurant. But then Sarah
Hmm.
starts talking about, like, well, I've seen that you've been hanging out with Peter, like my ex boyfriend, Peter. And Rachel's kind of denying that anything's really going on. And Sarah's like, no, it's great because, like, he should have, like, company and, like, a really great girl like you. And it ends up with them arguing over who's prettier. And it's just
Yeah,
very funny.
I don't think she really meant it. I think I mean, she
Yeah.
probably, okay, yeah, she's pretty. I think, but I think she said it in a way where she's trying to make it okay for Peter to date her because she clearly is starting to have feelings again for Peter.
She's trying to
And
convince, well, I think she's trying to convince herself she's over Peter, but also she wants to know how close Peter and Rachel are getting.
mhm. And while she's telling Rachel how good Peter is, she kind of starts upsetting herself.
And kind of it turns into a situation where Rachel sort of has to comfort her.
Yes.
Also because, like, that's her job as a hotel employee too. So poor Rachel just, like, kinda gets stuck in the middle of all this.
Yeah.
We cut to Peter going back to Kunu, the surf instructor, telling him he wants to stand on a wave before he leaves Hawaii. So Peter's just kinda feel like he has renewed energy, a new sense of self after this situation with Rachel.
Hmm.
So they go out on the water. Peter ends up running into Aldous, like they're both just hanging out on surfboards in the water. Aldous tells Peter that he likes his music.
He was talking about, yeah, he just like mentions he likes his music and he goes,
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
right.
Mhm.
And Peter doesn't believe all this. And he's like, no, no, seriously, I was, had Sarah's, I think he says iPod or something, but
Oh, right.
he was
Mhm.
listening to random music on her playlist, and he's like, yeah, most of it is utter shit. But then something else came on, something different. And it was dark, and oh, look at the name, and it was you. He's like, oh,
Mhm.
get the shit out of here! Like, oh, awesome, thanks for that means
Mhm.
something.
Yeah.
And you see like a glimmer of Peter thinking maybe all the snow is not as bad as he thinks he is. Like maybe
Mhm.
he only hated him because that's Sarah's current boyfriend that he
Right.
was dumped for.
Mhm.
But then,
Aldous says something that makes Peter realize that Sarah has been seeing Aldous for a year, which
mhm,
means they basically overlapped a year.
after
Yeah.
they reveal that they were together for a year, he like, get out of my ocean, get away
Yeah.
from me. Like they were almost bonding for a second. And
Yes.
again, it's not, he just pushing him away, the bad boyfriend theory, right?
Mhm.
And so he's just like, get out of here, leave me alone. I want to be alone in my ocean. And then he tries to surf and
Mhm.
runs into snow with his
Yep.
surfboard.
Yep. So they both, like, wipe out, and we see Peter carrying Aldous to shore. Somehow in them crashing into each other, Aldous got coral stuck in his leg. He begs Peter to get it out of his leg, and he's, like, just rightfully so, but turned into this very whiny, like, man, like, just his cool exterior, everything's gone. But he's begging Peter to pull it out. Peter says, like, he has a problem with blood, and he's like, "No, just get it out," like a little kid. And, it Peter pulls it out, immediately, like, blood, like, immediately starts coming out, and Peter passes out, which
Hmm.
I feel him on this because this scene literally always makes me feel queasy, like, the way the coral is stuck in there. I'm like, "Ooh."
Yeah, it looks pretty real.
Yeah.
I also
Um,
like that he's running up the beach and Kuno's giving a lesson and he's asking Kuno for help. He's like, yeah, the hotel doesn't really want me to do that kind of stuff on account of liability. He's like, well, can you just call somebody then? He's like,
yeah.
oh, yeah, right. I could probably do that.
Yeah. So we see that when Peter comes to, Sarah's sitting with him. She says she didn't want him to wake up all alone, which, to be fair, is nice of her. But he tells Sarah he knows that she was cheating on him with Aldous. She counters with Peter seemed to be maybe slipping into a depression. Because she says something like, I couldn't just keep taking care of you. I couldn't just drown with you. And she comes up with things like he wasn't cleaning up after himself. He was wearing the same sweatpants for 5 days, and they're obviously not understanding where the other's coming from because Peter makes a quip like, "Oh, but if they were, like, designer sweatpants, I would have been fine." And
Right.
this isn't
Sean Jones.
exactly yeah, this isn't exactly her point, right? It's that he wasn't really doing anything to kind of better himself or move forward or take care of himself, and he's seeing it as her coming from, like, a superficial place, which
Hmm.
maybe both can be true, maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? But I do like that we're getting more insight into her side of things, that she's not just, like, completely, like, this bad person that just dumped him for the cool rock star. I like that there's more nuance to these characters.
Yeah, because typically in these kind of movies, you have the breakup and that's kind of all we get. They broke up with somebody. They're meant to be the bad guy. Usually they have that bad boyfriend or girlfriend complex. There's like,
Mhm.
oh, they're doing all these mean things. It's for the better. He's better off. Peter's
Right.
better off. But she has this aside and is now yelling at Peter that she did a lot of things to help that he didn't notice. She did different therapy sessions. She said sex therapy, emotional therapy, physical, like anything to try to make it work. But um,
Mhm.
she she said to Peter that he was too stupid to notice,
Yeah.
and you kind of feel bad for Sarah in this scene. Like she probably had been trying for years.
Yeah, and it's the first sense we get that, like, she really wanted this relationship to work too.
Hmm.
She obviously went about things a different way in terms of ending it, um, but not because she didn't care about Peter or care about the relationship.
Right.
Um, yeah, so we cut to Sarah getting ready to go out to dinner with Aldous. She's disappointed that he isn't wearing a shirt she bought him. We cut to flashbacks of Peter always appreciating stuff that Sarah got him, including clothes, including
Yeah.
apparently some really, like, bad clothes.
Yeah. Apparently, she has bad taste in men's shirts. I don't know. Um, they work for the island, I suppose, but in these flashbacks, he's got like this weird hat on, and they're at a bar, and the bartender's like, "Cool hat." It's like, "Thanks, my girlfriend bought it for me," and she's like, "No, I was fucking with you."
Yeah.
Like, and he's just shown being that Mister Nice Guy, and he's wearing the stuff because she bought it for him.
Yep.
And Aldous is like, "That shirt's ridiculous. I would never wear that shirt."
Mhm. So they go to dinner. They run into Peter and Rachel, like, waiting for a table. They all end up sitting together. I think it's, Sarah this time who suggests it, and then
It
all
was
this is
Peter.
li Oh, it was Peter, okay.
Yeah, so they're
Um,
they're standing in line, and Jonah Hill's like, "Oh my god, Aldous, I didn't see you back there. I'm so sorry. I'll get you a table in a second, but we're full." And
mhm.
while he like runs away for a second, and Peter compliments Aldous' shirt because he's now wearing the shirt Sarah had bought him. He's like, "Oh, Sarah must have bought you that shirt." He's like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
And the Jonah Hill comes back and mentions that there's no tables available, and Peter, just trying to be friendly, says you can sit with us. And you can see Rachel and all this are about to interject, but Sarah quickly says yes,
Yeah.
and then everyone's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
like why did we do this?" Um, in
Yeah,
fact, like when they're walking to the table, Aldous is like, "Oh, okay, so this is happening. This is really happening. Okay, here we go." Like he's kind of the voice of reason here.
yeah, and that's what stuck out to me about this is because Aldous is the one who would have previously been like, "Oh, let's all have dinner together," but I think maybe he's realizing, especially after that encounter with Peter in the ocean, that, like, he doesn't want to necessarily be the guy who's playing nice with everyone either. And, yeah, I think it must be Peter then, because I think it's Rachel says, like, why did you even suggest that?" And he's like, "Well, I didn't think she was gonna say yes."
Yeah, it's one of those
Um,
situations where you're just trying to be nice and you really just shouldn't,
yeah. Um,
unfortunately.
right. But I like this sort of a montage of them having dinner together. They're all drinking a lot of wine.
As
Yeah.
they dive further into the bottles of wine,
Mhm.
Sarah had mentioned for whatever reason she was, something about Australia came up, and she's like, "Oh, I was there for filming this movie," and the boys kind of grown, and they start bonding over the fact that there's a really horrible movie
Mhm.
right in front of Sarah Marshall, obviously, and she feels bad because that was probably her one movie she's done. She's a TV actress, and she's trying to
Yeah.
break into film. And it's funny because then like Rachel is trying to comfort her. The boys are just kind of making fun of this stupid killer cell phone movie.
She says something like, "Well, I think it sounds good. When does it come out?" And Sarah says, "It already did." And Rachel's
That's
like,
right.
"Oh, well, it's an island. It's small. We don't really get things."
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. Aldous says something that indicates he's going to cheat on Sarah a lot.
He is just talking about his free spiritness and how just like love is just this concept, and he's gonna love everybody all the time, and he likes showing people love physically, basically saying like this is what I do.
Oh, right.
I'm
Okay.
not really a committed person. I see somebody, we have a connection, we're gonna physically have a connection.
Okay. Gotcha.
He's a free spirit.
There you go. Well, Aldous ends up spilling cranberry juice on his shirt and he makes a crack about like, "Oh no, I've ruined this like wonderful shirt or whatever." And obviously like Sarah knows he hates the clothes she picked out for him. And we start to get a little bit of animosity between the two couples. Sarah makes a quip that Hawaii is just for people who can't handle the real world. And she very obviously brings this up because she wants to get a dig in at Rachel. Um, and Rachel ends up kissing Peter in front of her and saying something about how she likes living in Hawaii. She likes her life. And then I assume the Jonah Hill character comes back and asks Aldous if he's listened to that demo yet, because I have a quote that says, "I was going to listen to that, but then I just carried on living my life."
Yeah, that's so mean.
Yep.
I just didn't get why Sarah did that dig to Rachel, because Rachel was literally just trying to stick up for her dumb movie.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was just suddenly Sarah was feeling insecure. Yeah, it was disappointing because it went from like them at least trying to be cordial and everything to then like really catty.
Right.
But then we cut back to each couple in their respective hotel rooms. Sarah wakes up and she can hear Rachel and Peter making out. She makes Aldous wake up so that they can be intimate and make some noises as well. And it turns into like a competition between the two rooms, except that Aldous is like still asleep basically and like really not into it at all.
Yeah, Sarah is acting over the top here,
Yep.
and I wrote, it sounds like Sarah is having a massive shit. And I think all this thinks so too, because he like bucks her off of him and is like, "What are
Mhm.
you doing?" It's like I've heard women faking before, but that was atrocious. That was a horrible performance,
Mhm.
and it's
And
also kind of funny considering she's an actress in the movie.
that's true too, yeah. And he says something like that he made a mistake coming here with her because she's not over Peter.
Hmm.
And in response, she Sarah finally like calls Aldous out on some of his bullshit and talks about how all of his tattoos are like different religions and spiritualities and they're completely conflicting ideologies, which I do appreciate because he is kind of fake. So Rachel and Peter establish that they like each other. I think it's fair to say that at this point that Rachel's genuinely into him and not just doing her
Hmm.
job or whatever.
Rachel spent the night with Peter, and the next morning, um, they kind of established like, "Yeah, let's do more of this. We actually like each other." And so Rachel, has to work. Obviously, it's what she's there for. And she leaves, and then just we see a montage of Peter just hanging out with more of the employees. This is his like friends now while he's on vacation, and he's having fun. He's hanging out with other families and doing other things. And it kind of, in a weird way, reminded me of Groundhog Day when Phil gets to know everybody because he's repeating that everyday life. But it kind of gave me that vibe, maybe because we just watched it. But he seems to know all these employees. He knows the newlyweds, and he kind of gets
Mhm.
in buddy buddy with a lot of people. And he's doing it more so now that he's not depressed.
Mhm. So after this, Peter runs into Aldous in the lobby, realizes that Aldous is leaving, that he and Sarah aren't together. And I think Aldous makes a crack like how you survived 5 years under that dictatorship. I don't
Hmm.
know, or
Yeah.
something like that. He insults Sarah in some way. So Peter goes to check on Sarah.
Mm, mm,
Sarah tells Peter she's been thinking that she made a big mistake dumping him. She tells Peter she loves him. She's crying, she's begging him. And I think he says something like, "Tell me you're sorry." And as soon as she says she's sorry, he gives in and kisses her back.
hmm.
And every time I saw this in a theater for a screening, the second he gives in and kisses her, like, the whole theater would groan. Like,
Yeah.
everyone was rooting so hard for them to, like, stay split, for him to just go to Rachel, "Don't worry about Sarah anymore." Literally, I hear that in my head all the time when I watch
Yeah.
this scene.
Oh, come on, man. Like it's and before he gives in too, when she starts telling him she made a mistake and she still loves him, he literally
Mhm.
says what I was thinking. Was like, that's not fair. When she
Mhm.
said that to him, I was like, yeah, that's right. And now that she's in a vulnerable
Mhm.
position, it's now okay to say you made a mistake when you see that Peter's happy.
Because she sees that Peter's happy, she realized Aldous wasn't a good guy. It's easy for her to say that now, despite Peter kinda giving in. Very quickly, he realizes that he doesn't wanna be with her anymore, that she's hurt him too much, but he ends up finding Rachel and confesses all this to her, that he kinda hooked up a little bit with Sarah, and Rachel responds by asking Peter to leave her alone.
Yeah, he's doing the right thing and
Mhm.
saying he fucked up. He doesn't want to
Mhm.
lie and hide it, and I can applaud that. But I'm just so mad he was in that situation to begin with. You
Mhm.
know, I went to see if she's okay. Who the fuck cares?
Well, and
And
maybe at this
she
point too, you could argue it's really too soon for either of them to be in a new relationship when they just got out of a 5.5-year relationship.
that's also fair, yeah.
Mhm.
But he's doing the right thing, like I said, and she tells him, "I don't want to hear anymore. Just leave, go away, don't call, don't write, don't eat, don't email."
Yeah.
And so he just tail between the legs and leaves.
Mhm. He does end up going to that bar that has a topless photo of Rachel.
Mhm.
He gets beat up trying to take it off the wall, just like Rachel said he would, but then he walks back into the hotel, like, all completely bruised and bloody and, like, disheveled, and just walks up to Rachel, slams the picture down, and walks away.
Yeah. We see him getting comforted with by the one bartender and the big guy with the pocket beer, and they're kind of comforting him a little bit because he's literally licking his wounds.
Right.
And they kind of like give Rachel a quick empathetic glance up at her. Come on, man.
Mhm.
It was like this guy, he's been sad anyways. Like, don't, what are you doing to him?
Mhm.
He did that last thing and then he leaves. He leaves Hawaii.
Mhm. Yep. And we see kind of a montage of him back at home. He decides to really, like, buckle down and work on the Dracula musical, I guess especially since he lost his job too, if the show got canceled.
Right.
And he's doing these little things to better himself, like, very slowly. He starts out being, like, really depressed, not wanting to do anything. Slowly, we see him working more, but then also, like, working out, maybe, like, eating a little better,
The
whatever.
bowl of cereal was slightly smaller and the clothes are
Mhm.
off the treadmill and he was using it.
Yep. I do like, though, at the beginning of the montage when he's, like, trying to work on the musical and it's like nothing's really coming to him, he sings a little song where he says, "Peter, you suck, you don't do anything of value."
Yeah, he starts kind
Um,
of getting mad at himself, and it comes
mhm,
through out in his song. Then I think it's the same scene, or maybe it's later in the montage, but he's doing that again on the piano. He's like, "Go see a therapist." I don't want to see a therapist. Maybe you should. I don't want to.
Yeah, I
He's just
know.
arguing with himself for a couple seconds.
I feel that though, when you like, just when you have those periods of time, whether it's, like, a personal thing or you're trying to work on something, you're like, "Do I do anything of value?" Like, I don't know. Who knows?
Right.
Like, so eventually, we get to a point where he's ready to premiere the Dracula musical, like, it's finished, and we see him, I think, mailing Rachel a flyer for the premiere.
I don't know if we
I can't
see that, but we
remember.
see
Or
her
she
at the
opens it,
desk
yes.
going through mail, and
That's
it's
it.
addressed to her. It's this gothic looking envelope because it's a
Mhm,
Dracula musical, and
mhm,
it's 2 tickets to the premiere.
mhm,
And she goes to the bartender, the fish guy, and she's still clearly upset. I don't know how long it's been. It's got to be some time because he got
Mhm.
a puppet musical greenlit
Made,
and is about
yeah.
to, yeah, so it's been at least a year, I would think, or maybe 6 months. Doesn't
Mhm.
matter. And the bartender is telling her like, go see him. You guys were hitting it off. Wow, I'm mad at him still. And he gets it. He's like, yeah, but he apologized, and he also basically turned down being with Sarah Marshall. Like nothing
Mhm.
happened. Something almost happened. He's like, know how many guys would walk away from that? He's like Gandhi, but better. He likes puppets.
Yeah.
And this apparently was the line that gets Rachel to show up at the
Mhm.
premiere.
Yeah. I love the little bit we get to see of the Dracula musical. Like I
Oh
said,
yeah,
I love Muppets. I would totally go see like a puppet Dracula musical. I love that Bill Hader, his half brother or his stepbrother rather, is
yeah.
helping him put it on. He plays Van Helsing. I
Hmm.
think it's so funny though because they have the puppeteers like dressed in all black, like in theory to blend into the background, but like they don't because you can still see like their faces and you can very much see these actors that are working behind the puppets, but the actors are doing the singing and everything too. Peter is the Dracula puppet, right?
Yep, yep,
Yep. Okay. And his Bill Hader is Van Helsing. For what it's worth, the crowd seems really into it. I like that when Dracula dies, when the Dracula puppet dies, they have the red rag in the mouth to show that he's dying, and it's, like, very, like, old school, like,
yeah.
Shakespeare, when they like, stab someone and the red, like, hanky would come out or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, uh, at some point, Peter notices Rachel in the audience, which is very sweet. I love that his brother gets so into it.
Yeah, he's like shouting the end part, like he's like a warrior on battlefield or something. He's
Yeah,
like belting out, and
yeah.
it's not, you don't hear it exactly. It's mixed in, appropriately, but you can tell how Hader is giving the performance, and then Jason Segel like looks at him and is like, "Whoa, man, calm down."
Is it backstage afterward that
Yeah,
Rachel
they go
and Peter meet up?
backstage
Okay.
and she comes and talks to him.
Mhm.
And everyone, like you said, the crowd seems really in on this show, and you just hear like random. I heard random lines in the background. They're trying to get Peter's attention while he's talking to Rachel, and one of the ones that stuck out to me is like, "Hey, Peter, come over here and meet my mom." I don't know why I thought that was so funny.
It feels very like High School Drama Club.
Yeah, that's probably it.
As someone who is in High School Drama Club, yes. But he and Rachel talk briefly, and she says, "You never called." And he said, "You told me not to." And I listened. I like that exchange. But
Yeah.
we learned that Rachel's in town for a little bit, gonna look at some colleges, see what's next, I guess. Rachel, we see her walking to her car. She kind of doubles back, I guess, decides to go talk to Peter. He is changing in the dressing room of the theater, completely naked, because why not?
Hmm. Right.
He decides he's going to call Rachel before getting dressed. I don't know. She ends up walking in on him completely naked, calling her. And he says he was just calling her. And she laughs and admits to missing him. And I think they kiss while he still has no clothes on.
No, I don't remember. I think she just they like kind of laugh, and he's like, please stop laughing,"
Yeah,
because he's naked
he's
and
naked.
he's covering himself up.
But I thought they
Um,
kiss and then they pan to the two like vampire puppets.
oh, maybe.
Either way, we assume they get together.
Yeah. So what I was gonna say earlier, when he was naked in the beginning, I thought it was done well because it was awkward, and he's being
Hmm.
broken up with, and he refuses to get dressed, and he's this like big blubbering baby.
Yeah.
Here, I think they're just harking back at that previous joke. It just doesn't land for me as well. It's just like,
Hmm.
why are you naked on the phone, and why is your door not locked? And I get the joke,
Right.
but
Hmm.
I don't think it was as funny as it was in the beginning.
Hmm. I get that. Yeah, because to me, I'm always like, why don't you at least put pants on before you make your phone call? Because
Yeah,
apparently anyone could just walk in.
right.
Yep.
Like that one guy's mom he wanted to meet. What if that was her?
Yeah. Um, I do like the little, like, credit scene we get of Sarah Marshall's new show, where it's basically the same type of cop show, except she's now a detective who can talk to pets,
Yeah.
and that, like, helps her solve crimes because, like, the pets see the crimes.
And then tell on the murder. Yeah.
Mhm, and, her sidekick now is Jason Bateman,
Yep.
which, I love Jason Bateman. I would probably watch the show if he was in it. He's one of
Yeah,
those
especially
actors
because
I'll, like,
he
watch anything, and so
right. Well, he also has some pretty campy lines in the little trailer we see
Mhm,
when she gets the information from the dog that this guy killed whoever they're looking for,
mhm,
and the bad guy either calls Sarah or the dog a bitch, I think.
mhm.
And Jason Bateman's like, "Yeah, well, where you're going, that's what you're about to be." I'm
Yeah.
like, I would watch a dumb show like that if Jason Bateman was giving out those lines.
Did you have any other commentary?
On the rewatch, I realized I think I liked it more than I originally had thought. I enjoyed the watch here. I feel maybe because I didn't watch How I Met Your Mother, I don't appreciate Jason Segel as much maybe as other people.
Mhm.
He can be polarizing. He kind of reminds me of like a Will Ferrell type, where people love him or hate
Yeah, I
him.
could see that. Mhm.
Um, they're just also big, tall, goofy guys.
Yeah, I mean, regardless, I guess, of whether this movie is, like, actually good or not, like, it's just so, like, special to me, and I still think it's really funny. I mean, this was the first real experience I had of, like, watching something, reading something, any kind of media that I was taking in that really, like, mirrored what was happening in my real life at the time. We could have, like, called this podcast, like, the Forgetting Sarah Marshall, like, memorial podcast or something. Because that was the whole, like, basis of this little idea that, like, grew into this. I will say watching it this time, it really struck me how we touched on this a little bit, like, Mila Kunis's character is kinda doing that cool girl thing, like, saying that Peter doesn't have to dote on her, like, she's not like other girls. She tells Peter multiple times to stop being so sensitive,
Yeah.
and, when he won't jump off the cliff, she basically calls him a woman because he's not brave.
Yeah, she says, I can see your vagina from here.
Right.
While she's in the water and he's on the cliff.
Exactly. But that being said, like, I still really love Mila Kunis in this movie. I mean, I do think she's genuinely, like, very cool.
Oh,
At least
yeah.
the character of Rachel is very cool. I do feel like, at least when it came out, it felt really fresh and, like, different and really funny. Feel like Jason Segel seemed like a very millennial filmmaker. Like, he used music we grew up with. He made fun of a lot of Hollywood tropes, movie tropes, and definitely the full frontal male nudity is something we don't see a lot, and, like, he wasn't afraid to go there. I guess I kinda wonder, like I said, what happened to him or what kinda career he has because this was very much, like, his movie, like, he wrote it, he starred in it.
Right.
I think he has a TV show on HBO now? So I don't know. I hope he's doing
Hmm.
well. I His movie means a lot to me.
I'll let him know.
Yeah, right.
Could always get more Paul Rudd and Bill Hader in a movie, and I like Kristen Bell, but I also like when she's funny, and I kind of wanted a little bit more of that, but I guess it wouldn't have made sense in this role.
Yeah, she was, like, more the straight man in this one
Yeah,
because Peter's so goofy. But, yeah, I
yeah.
really like funny Kristen Bell. That's a good point.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break, and when we get back, we will discuss my breakup pick.
Alright, so we're back, and now we're gonna talk about Joe's pick.
My pick is High Fidelity, directed by Stephen Frears. Release date March 28th, 2000, and it is rated R. If you're unfamiliar with High Fidelity, it is about Rob, who owns a record store in Chicago and just got dumped by his girlfriend. He goes through a personal romantic Rolodex of exes to figure out why he keeps getting dumped. Why does this keep happening to him? Why me? Somewhere along the way, he learns to grow up a bit and also learns to love and be loved. Pretty sure I saw this early college or late high school. I think part of the reason my buddy and I watched it is because of Jack Black, and he's starting to grow fame with Tenacious D. Knowing that he was in there, I know I kind of wanted to watch that, and it might have happened probably after I did have a breakup, which would have been early college, and I think it just happened to work out that way. That's why I picked this movie.
Yeah, I know I saw it in high school. It was not necessarily because of a breakup. I went through a John Cusack stage in high school.
That's fair.
I watched this, Say Anything, not so much his later like spooky movies. This is definitely a breakup movie. I've just
Hmm.
never used it that way.
Yeah, it's I guess would make more sense probably for a guy to pick this as a like breakup healing movie because
Hmm.
the main character Rob gets broken up with, as we learn more than once, and that's kind of the whole premise of the movie. It's the why me, what's it all for type thing, which literally is said later in the film.
Hmm.
But we open with some good music. We know this is gonna have probably a good soundtrack. They are kind of these music nerds, these elitists, and they work at a record shop. So the soundtrack is going to be fun. We open on Rob, and he's listening to music, and he's talking about being broken up with Laura, I believe, and he's miserable. And he's kind of comparing it to: is he listening to pop music because he's miserable, or is he miserable because he's listening to pop music? Like, what came first, the chicken or the egg type situation?
Well, what
What's
came
making him?
first, the music or the misery? It's funny because I specifically remember the first time I saw this, I had never thought of pop music as depressing, but I also think because I was younger when I saw this and just the time I grew up in, pop music meant like Britney Spears and In Sync, and I was like, what's so sad about that? But I think he means it as generally like popular music.
Yeah, his movie is all about lists, and I love lists, so it's fun for me.
I also
Uh,
love lists.
Yeah, I don't even know why. I'll make a list just to check things off.
Are you a Virgo?
No, I'm a Scorpio.
I'm told that that's a Virgo trait is you really like lists.
Hmm.
Not that I'm super into astrology, but that's one of those like Virgo traits that are actually true for me.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Maybe I have a moon or something. I don't know how that works. I'm bad at this stuff.
I don't know.
Anyway, so an introduction of his girlfriend and then breaking up. This is Laura. Again, lists. Everything's a list with Rob. And if you don't know by now, by the way we're talking about it, he will break the fourth wall. That's pretty much the whole movie. He's talking to
Hmm.
us, the audience.
Hmm.
And so he is telling us his all time five most memorable breakups, which immediately he says Laura doesn't make the cut. He's because he's mad at her. They just broken up. He says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 real quick, and then he's going to go into all of them. But number five wasn't even Laura, so he's pretending he's not hurt. Obviously,
Hmm. So we immediately go into number one.
Allison Ashmore. They were in high school, I believe, right?
I think he said
Kids.
middle school because they were
Oh,
like 14. Because
oh
this
yeah.
was like
So
his very first like girlfriend or whatever.
he was hurt young, and it just kind of stuck with him.
Hmm.
I believe the relationship was just kind of making out under the bleachers
Hmm.
a couple days a week. Like it was a very short
I
relationship,
think literally just a couple days. Yeah.
and then one day he went to meet her there, and it was somebody else,
Yep.
and that was it.
That
But
was
that stuck
it.
with him. That it
Yeah.
stuck. It was his first heartbreak.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
guess you always remember, your first heartbreak, I suppose, whether how trivial or serious it could possibly be.
I
I don't know.
guess. I don't know, man. Like,
Yeah,
how old is he now? And he's like, man, when I was 14, that
yeah.
was the
That's
start of it all.
well, as we see, as much as I really like John Cusack, and I think he's great in this role. I can't imagine anyone else doing this movie.
Yeah.
But Rob, in a different, age of me watching this, is it's really hard to like. We'll probably get into that more, if not during the film, but for our thoughts afterwards.
Mhm.
So I think that's part of it. I think Rob, is very self-centered. So this happening to him, whether he was 14 or 24, it stung
Yeah.
because she picked somebody else. And that
Hmm.
is going to be the theme. Like someone's always leaving him for somebody else.
So very brief, number one.
So on to number two, because number one is very quick, although it clearly hurt him enough to make number one. Penny. He's a little older. This might be high school now, like before they
I
go to
think it's high
college, I believe.
school. Hmm.
Yeah, like end of because feel like there was something about like hooking up before they went to college or something like
Yes.
that later on that comes up. And he's just kind of, they're gropey teens. And again, this is more a physical
Mhm,
thing, making out with Allison, and now they're making out, and he wants to take it further, and she
mhm.
does not. And he was kind of very pushy about it, and just kind of, I think this is the relationship he breaks up with her.
Well, he doesn't realize that at the time.
Yeah, but they show us like when he's even talking about it, he's
Yeah, he's kinda,
in
like,
the
walking
rain. He's
away from
always yeah,
her.
he's always in the
Mhm.
rain for some reason.
Yeah, he is always in the rain.
But yeah,
He's
he
Taylor Swift. Breakups in the rain.
John Cusack is Taylor Swift for men. What? At least in this movie.
Right?
Uh,
Um,
yeah. He basically is on her front stoop, and he's just kind of like nonchalantly like, "This ain't going anywhere, so I am," and he just kind of walks away.
right, exactly, and
So
he's
that's
very frustrated with the fact that basically that Penny won't put out, so to speak.
yeah, and I think why it's breakup number 2 on his all top 5 is because the next guy she was dating, they hooked up right away. He learns this in chemistry class.
Yeah, because the guy's bragging about it, and it was, like, a really fast turnaround, so he takes it to mean that she must not have liked him very much because she wouldn't go all the way with him, and
Hmm.
she met a new guy really quick. The Penny breakup, the whole Penny situation to me is really icky, especially watching this back as an older person. I don't know, it's pretty obvious from his recollection that he broke up with her because of her not wanting to hook up. He makes a comment in there somewhere about he knows now that women save their best underwear for when they're going to sleep with someone, but like their everyday stuff is just like ugly or like old or whatever. And, there's a lot of calling people bitch, calling people slut. Sorry, calling women these things specifically,
Yes,
women
yes.
specifically. I don't know if this just went over my head when I was younger or if I thought maybe he had a right to be upset about something like this because I was too young to understand, like, actual relationships and also the way people give shit to women for a lot of things in life.
It was probably a mix of both for me. I think I
Mhm.
was young enough just to have it go, I wouldn't say over my head, but go unnoticed how frequent that language is in the movie.
Mhm.
But also, that was, I don't want to say different time, as that was acceptable. It's just I was a different person,
Mhm.
and not noticing those things was probably more likely than as an adult.
Yeah, and Penny's the perfect example of that where she's a prude because she won't hook up with Rob, but then she moves on really quickly and sleeps with someone else, so now she's a slut.
Hmm.
And things like that didn't make me bristle at, 16 or whatever, the way they do now, because I've lived in this world as a woman.
Yeah, I think it went a little unnoticed how frequent those terms were used, but I think there was maybe a part of me. I think you said it best: is we almost make an excuse for characters in situations like this because they are hurt and people say dumb things when they're upset.
Right.
I also think it's kind of to make Rob not so likable, not yet, at least. Like he just got broken up with,
Mhm.
and this is how, instead of where in your pick, um, Peter is really sad and kind of inward looking and kind of being a homebody slob, Rob
Mhm.
is, he's very much blaming other people instead of himself. They
Mhm.
react to the same situation way differently.
Yeah, and I think too for like, in a general sense, when you're watching a movie like this, you're just like, "Well, that person's the dumper, so they're bad, and look how hurt our dumpy is,"
Right.
and it's easy to feel very black and white about it. And because especially, the opening of High Fidelity, we just see Laura leaving him. We don't know
Mhm.
anything else. We just know that Laura left, and he's very sad and, like, yelling out a window at her and recounting now all the ways that women have ever done him wrong.
Yeah. Right. So we
Mhm.
see the record shop that Rob owns and works at, and we see, first one we see is Dick. He's the more sensitive of the two employees.
Mhm.
He kind of gives me like Michael Stipe from REM vibes. This actor, I forget the actor's name, and I
That's what
apologize.
I always think of too, but then I'm like, do I just think every like scrawny bald white man is Michael Stipe? Is that just what the criteria is?
Oh, he's like soft spoken as well.
Mhm.
There's other attributes, but yeah, also maybe.
Yeah. I just like that Dick offers to make Rob a tape, and man, it just made me feel so old because he offers to tape something for Rob, and he like has a physical cassette tape with him. And I made so many mixtapes for my friends, like in middle
Yeah.
school and high school, like just like not at all a thing anymore. My son wants to hear a song, look it up on Spotify. There we go.
To kind of balance the scales of characters, Barry, which is
Hmm.
Jack Black, and he's very Jack Black. He is loud and brash, also kind of dickish, kind of me. He just pulls the tape out what they're listening to. It's all sad. I think he says that sucks ass or
Yeah.
whatever, and he like throws it,
Hmm.
and he just plays his song without asking, and it's Rob's in the office and it's like blasting, and he's trying to do
Hmm.
something back there, working, I'm assuming, and he's shouting over the music to turn it down. And Barry's like, I can't go up any louder. I can't,
Yeah.
it won't go louder. Just again being an asshole.
Yep. I love the way Jack Black dances to I think it's Walking on Sunshine he
Yeah,
plays. He There's this cut of him like kind of doing this twirl, but it's like he's using his head to like get
his
the
whole
momentum
body.
to like move
Yeah,
his whole body in a circle. It's like so funny.
I like
Um
how he claps in this song for some stupid reason. Because when I hear it at work, because I work in retail, it comes on,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I will just, and people can't see me right now, but I will do
Yeah.
the clap
Yeah.
when the song comes on. My coworkers look at me like, "What the are you doing?"
Well, cuz it's not like
It's not normal.
it's not a
It's
normal clap. It's like one hand like laying on the other.
yeah.
I don't know how else to explain this
He's
without it being a
clapping
video.
parallel to the ground.
Yeah.
No, who claps parallel?
Yep. Barry.
Barry. So weird. But yeah, this is how we're introduced to Dick and Barry.
Could you imagine working with Barry every day?
Oh, I'm probably sure I have. I think I've worked with a Dick and Barry in my life.
It's funny because I did work retail, and I specifically worked retail in a music store. Not like a cool music store, but like a very corporate, big chain music store. And we didn't sell vinyl, but I feel like even then I kind of had some people like Barry, but I mean, we didn't get to pick what we listened to, so you just had to deal with it.
Yeah, true. Rob jumps the counter and unplugs Barry's tape, much as he took out Dick's tape. And Barry gets all butthurt and sad and offended. He's like, "I made you a special morning, Monday morning tape or whatever." And
Yeah.
he's like, "Well, we can play it tomorrow." He's like, "No, I want to play it now." He's like a little child. He's throwing a, Jack Black tantrum.
Mhm.
Rob continues to have asides, break the fourth wall, which I love. He explains to us that he put an ad out for part-time work and hired Barry and Dick for that, but they just show up every day, and he can't fire them because of that, because they
Yeah.
technically aren't, like, half the time they're probably not clocked in, is the vibe I get. They work there, and when they're not working there, they hang out there. So
Right.
like in this scene, I feel like Rob and Dick were working, and Barry just comes in and plays music to hang out with them.
Right. And as we see later too, I think they're potentially his only friends.
Real friends, at least. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, they doesn't. Besides the women, he doesn't really talk to or about anybody else.
Yeah, that's true.
So what? Number three,
Mhm.
Charlie. We start talking about Charlie, but we don't. He says he wants to come back to Charlie because he always thought she was out of his league,
Mhm.
and he was always worried about that. So we see kind of some self doubt, at least with
Mhm.
this relationship.
Charlie almost gives me like manic pixie dream girl vibes, even though that's not completely accurate. But it just seems like, in terms of what someone like Rob would think was cool,
Hmm.
Charlie totally fits the bill, like his dream girl. And then he spent the entire relationship wondering why she liked him and feeling insecure about himself. Um, I do think it's really funny that when she does leave him for another guy, which is what he is always worried about, he's
Hmm.
like out in the rain again,
The
and
rain.
he's yelling outside her apartment, "Charlie, you fucking bitch, let's work it out."
Right, because that's going to go over so well with
Right,
anybody.
right.
Like he's mad, but he still wants to work it out, and he's insulting, and
Mhm, mhm.
yeah. But this was college Rob, I believe.
Yes.
So I believe these breakups are in chronological order, not as far as
Worse.
ranked.
Yeah. In my notes, he says he flunked out of school and started working in a record shop because
Okay.
he by the time he, like, pulled himself together out of, like, whatever depression from Charlie dumping him, it was, like, too late to salvage his
Yeah. And he says he
college
just
record.
yeah, he said when he woke up from his depression, he just found himself in the music store. He's apparently
Mhm,
bought it
mhm,
without even knowing he bought it, and he's running it, was doing things for the sake of doing it, and he wasn't really
mhm,
aware of what
mhm.
he was doing with his life. Doesn't seem like he ever really got over Charlie.
That was my impression too, to a point where I have in my notes, like, the way he holds her up, like, on a pedestal, basically, I'm surprised she's not number 1, and I've always thought that about this movie in general, but now you made a very good point that it's, like, chronological, like, these are his worst breakups, but maybe the order is chronological, not necessarily based on, like, the severity of the breakup.
But I think number 3 hurt the most because we come back to that one.
Mhm, I agree with that. I think Charlie messed him up big time.
Back on the floor of the record shop, I have here Jack Black is pretentious asshat, yet relatable. Because like he plays like mean in a very fun way. I feel his character very says things people want to say, but they don't because they have filters, I guess.
Right, yeah.
Um, he is mean to a customer that I think wants to buy a record for his daughter.
I
And
just
it's
called to
probably
say I love you.
yeah.
Mhm.
Rob's in the back talking to us about Charlie when we see Barry scare off his customer, and Rob comes out. Was like, "What are you doing that for? Why'd you have to offend him?" And he's like, "He offended me with his terrible tastes."
Yeah.
And then Rob's like, "Well, he's gonna buy a record for us. Who cares what his taste is for his daughter, anyways?" And he says, "Are you defending that ass muncher?"
Yeah.
Like Barry is such a prick,
Yes.
but yet it's funny because normal people wouldn't be saying these things to other humans, I guess.
Yeah, well, especially, like, Rob said, like, "We need customers. Why would you
Right.
just scare away the customer?" And I did kinda feel for the guy when he says, "I didn't know it was pick on the middle-aged square day," and I guess I'm a middle-aged square now?
I would disagree with at least half of that.
Chaff Joe.
You pick.
I don't think it's any argument to say that we're middle-aged at this point, but, just really weird to think about. I do tend to feel like a square when I'm going into, I don't know, record shops or, like, places that feel too cool for me to be in. The young people now are so much cooler than me, and I'm
Yeah,
intimidated.
that's true. Like for me too, as well. Not making fun of you, making fun of
Yeah,
myself.
it's okay.
Um, I feel like they were always cooler than me, even when I was a young person. So
It's how I've always
yeah,
felt, yes.
basically, Harry comes in, berates Rob and Dick. Eventually, Rob loses his cool and attacks his employee. And it's okay.
Yeah, that's how it goes. I like the way Dick tries to comfort Rob after learning that he and Laura broke up. He says, "Do you wanna talk about it?" You know, that kind of thing. Just keeps going and, like, doesn't really stop talking.
Yeah, it's very obvious Rob does not want to do any of that.
Yeah, it's obvious that Rob doesn't wanna talk about it and that also Dick doesn't know what to do in this situation.
Yeah, he just kind of stands there waiting for Rob to tell him something.
After this, we see Rob back at his apartment, and he realizes there's a message from Laura's mom on their answering machine, so apparently Laura, we get the impression she has not really told people in her life that they're broken up
Yeah,
because her
I mean
mom
that.
still thinks she lives there.
Yeah, it just happened though. So it hasn't
Mhm.
quite made the press yet, so to speak.
What, she didn't update her, like, Facebook profile yet?
No, she did not. It's not official. Rob is talking about number 4, Sarah, and how he always had a kinship with her because they were both broken up with recently at the time when he got with her,
Mhm,
and so they kind of had each other's back because they were both heartbroken and they found each other in their heartbreak.
mhm.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, he had just gotten dumped by Charlie, and she had just gotten out of a relationship, and the way he explains it, they were both scared that they were going to be alone forever, and they just sort of, like, held on to each other. But also they were 26, and 26 feels so young to me right now, but I guess
Yeah.
you worry about these things, so that's fine. I do like when she breaks up with him, though, she says she met someone else, which like, seems to be the pattern here, but she says it so happily, like they were only together until they could meet people to actually be with, as if this wasn't, like, a real relationship.
Yeah, I got that feeling too. But not just her telling him that, but kind of the introduction, like Rob saying how they were together because they were
Mhm.
miserable
Yeah, yeah.
recently. And I kind of felt like maybe it was unspoken that they're just kind of there for the time being to support each other. But it
Mhm.
obviously hurt him enough that she made the list.
Yeah. Well, maybe to Rob, it turned into something real.
Yeah,
I don't know.
just something he probably, at this point, at 26, wouldn't admit. So he's
Mhm.
mad, as he is often, and puts her on the list.
Yep.
So he's back at home talking about Sarah to us, the audience,
Mhm.
as always. And Dick's Dick stopped by Rob's and invites him to a concert or a show of some sort for somebody up and coming. And he finds him in the middle of reorganizing all of his records. So like the house is a mess. He probably
Mhm.
has as many records at his apartment that he has in his store. It seems like, because
Yeah.
any shot of the apartment, there's stacks on the wall behind him and
Mhm.
just everywhere. Which I guess, if you are that into music and you own a record shop, I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. But it's like taking
Oh,
his work home with him,
yeah.
which maybe he likes. Who knows?
He tells Dick that he's organizing his records autobiographically, and Dick says, "That sounds comforting."
Yeah, it's and he explains like how to get from A to B, and as a person who likes list and organization, that's too much for me. Like this is a little
Yeah.
too far down the rabbit hole, sir.
Yeah.
Clearly, he needs something to preoccupy his mind. He's still mourning over the breakup with Laura, and obviously, he's telling us 1, 2, 3, 4. So
Mhm.
there's a lot going on, and he's just trying to keep himself busy.
Mhm.
So Rob's mom calls the chat and finds out that Laura had left,
Mhm.
and she is crying and is upset on the phone that Rob is very non-committal.
Yeah.
She said something like, "Oh, I knew this would happen,"
Yeah.
and kind of blames Rob for being the problem. And we kind of feel that way because we've seen 1, 2, 3, 4. We haven't seen 5 on his list, but we've seen Laura, so we've seen 5 breakups.
Mhm.
And he gets kind of mad at his mom and yells at her, and hangs up, and is
Mhm.
like, "God damn, that was some cold shit."
Yeah. My impression is that his mom doesn't really like him that much, or at least she doesn't think very much of him because
Maybe I
she
think she just kind of called him out in his shit, though.
maybe. I didn't
Maybe a little bit of
read
both.
it that way because at first she was saying something like, "You're lucky that Laura's doing so well," because she, like, doesn't think too much of Rob's store.
That's true. Yeah,
I don't know if you've mentioned Laura's a lawyer, so she has
we have
a
not.
quote unquote real job, I guess the
Right.
way the mom is looking at it. And when he tells her that they broke up and she's crying, he says, "I'm all right if that's what's upsetting you." And she says, "That's not what is upsetting me." And she goes into the, "I knew this would happen again. You meet someone, you move in, she goes." It's like,
Yeah.
damn,
No,
okay.
that is some cold shit.
Yep.
So yeah, maybe his mom doesn't like him that much after all. I mean, I kind of got that vibe too, but I also kind of thought she's just, as everyone else in this movie, is sick of Rob's shit.
Mhm.
But maybe
Yeah.
after however old he is in this movie, but years of him doing the same stuff, she's just like, dude, I can't baby you anymore. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe it's a little bit of both.
I think that Rob decides to, like, head out to that show after this conversation. We see him outside a theater, and he says John Dillinger was shot dead behind this theater because his girlfriend tipped off the cops, and he really drives the point home, like, his girlfriend tipped them off.
He's kind of giving that aside as he's going to the club to hear Lisa Bonet. She's playing character Marie DeSalle,
Mhm.
and as he's walking in, we hear her singing a cover of "Baby I Love Your Way" by Peter Frampton, and it looks like he's offended at first. He goes up to the the doorman. He's like, "Is that Peter fucking Frampton?" And he's all upset about it.
Yeah.
But then he
I
goes in and just, I don't know, falls in love with her voice, with her performance, with whatever happened there from the door to the stage. His tone has changed.
Yeah. That line, "Is that Peter fucking Frampton?" I think about that anytime, for whatever reason, Peter Frampton comes up. I think it's funny too that Lisa Bonet plays this singer and her daughter, Zoe Kravitz, was in the like TV show of High Fidelity that was on Hulu. I do have in my notes, Lisa Bonet is so fucking cool. So I
She
really
is,
don't
yeah,
blame all of them for being so into her. She's just very like sure of herself and comfortable in, being on stage and her performance. They all agree that they've always hated this song, but now they kind of love it. I do.
yeah,
I did enjoy this cover. They all start talking about how they want to date a musician or live with a musician and like be
yeah.
like what inspires their songs and stuff.
They think it's cool if they could potentially date a musician and be their muse, I guess.
Mhm.
But also maybe they think it'd be cool to date a musician because Marie DeSalle was very cool, like you said.
Yes, yeah.
So they might be a little bit just enamored with her. In fact, Barry, I believe, invites
Mhm.
her to come to the store where they work
Yeah.
and gets mad, like, why would you do that? And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I thought we wanted customers.
Right, and it's so funny after that exchange where he, like, chased off the, middle-aged square. He's
Hmm.
like, "Well, I thought we wanted customers in the store. Didn't know it was, like, a secret."
Yeah. Well, Barry obviously is. Well, I'm assuming he's thinking if we get this cool musician in, people will
Mhm.
come and hang out and maybe buy some records versus the middle-aged square guy buying a record for his daughter, which
That
is still
too, but
money.
I
I mean,
I think they also just want Marie to think that they're cool.
yeah. Um, After the gig, he goes to his place and he gets a voicemail from a mutual friend, Liz, which is played by Joan Cusack. And I love when these two are in films together. I don't know
Mhm.
why. It's just funny for me. It's fun, especially this movie because um, Liz, who's the mutual friend, kind of starts swaying her friendship one way or the other for particular reasons, and she gets to I don't know, yell at her brother a lot on screen. I think that's probably fun for her. It's funny for me.
Mhm.
While he's listening to the voicemail or just finishes it, whatever, Laura shows up to the
Mhm.
apartment to get stuff, and he's home. This happens quite often. How many trips do you need to take? How much stuff do you have? I get everyone has a bunch of stuff, I guess, but it just
Mhm.
seems like and I think we see it more later on, but it just
Mhm.
seems like she's kind of making excuses to come over and
Mhm.
accidentally see him.
Anytime we get any interaction between Rob and Laura, it's because Laura is coming to get her stuff or she's, like, calling to see when she could come get her stuff. So I don't know
Hmm.
if it's just, like, a convenient, way to get them together to talk things out, in a scene. It's funny because you kinda touched on this already. This conversation he has with Laura where he asks if she still loves him. She says, they weren't getting along at all, and that's part of why she left. And she says he hasn't grown or changed at all basically since they met. And
Hmm.
like she's grown, she's changed, but he's in the same place. And it sounds like Rob is kind of stuck in this suspended adolescence and Laura maybe realized she had to kind of make some changes, maybe get like a big girl job, so to speak. Because I think Rob makes a dig at her. He starts talking about how she was so much happier when they were younger and like her hair was pink.
That was she might have been like in school still, like maybe pre-law or something. Or like the notion was they were kind of young and
Hmm.
carefree and like punk rock, I guess, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And yeah, he digs at her that now she's a lawyer and she has normal looking hair.
Well, because she says something like, "Well, I couldn't have pink hair anymore because of my job." And
Right,
it just gives the impression that, like, she grew up a little bit and is,
right,
doing what she gotta do as an adult, and he maybe isn't.
right.
Mhm.
He's clearly still not an adult yet. At least not mentally. Back at the record store, they are hanging out with this customer, Lewis, who, even though we see him in this one scene, I kind of get a vibe that he's there a little often. enough
Mhm.
that they have him first name basis, and also how they treat him a
Yeah.
little bit differently than most of the customers that Barry scares away.
Mhm.
And in this scene, there's a guy that comes in and asks for a certain record. He asks Barry specifically, and Barry goes, "Yeah, I still have it." And he's like, "Can you sell it this week?" And he says, "Maybe not. Maybe not this week. Maybe next." And he's like, "It's bullshit. You said that last week." He goes, "Is what it is."
Mhm.
And the other customer storms off, and Lewis looks at Rob, and Barry goes, "I'll buy it for $40," and they sell it to him.
Mhm.
And Lewis clearly is happy he's got this album, but
Mhm.
then he's like, "Man, you guys are kind of jerks. Like you're
Mhm.
music snob elitists." And this is coming from
Yeah.
someone who clearly hangs out there a little bit and respects them
And is
enough.
probably like a music snob himself, yeah.
Yeah.
In my notes, it says, he says they feel like underappreciated scholars, so you shit on people who know less than you. And as someone who went to film school, I can relate to this feeling. Both someone who maybe was guilty of it in the past and also someone who is made to feel like they did not belong in those situations because I didn't know as much as other people.
Yeah, I definitely got the latter of that. But yeah, there are often times with film school specifically where I was like, "Oh yeah, I really like these movies," and people are like, "Pff, those movies." Ugh." I'm like, "Okay, well,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna go
Um,
in the corner and cry now. Thanks."
yeah. Yes. I had a couple notes about this scene when they're doing their top 5 track ones, side ones. Rob, one of his picks is Janie Jones by The Clash, and that's the only time in this movie I'll probably have an opinion on, like, the musical trivia because I love The Clash, and that's actually one of my favorite Clash songs. Also, in this scene, in the foreground, there's a magazine rack, and you see AP Magazine, Alternative Press, which originated in Cleveland, and I think until very recently, their main offices were in Cleveland.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know
Mhm.
that. Little
Yeah.
Cleveland shout out on accident. So then in walks Marie DeSalle.
Mhm.
She was invited, so I don't know why everyone's surprised she showed up. I guess maybe they didn't think she would come to their little record store because she's too cool.
Mhm.
And they're like, "Oh, she's in the store." Like, I know. I'm like, we should probably turn off her music
Yeah.
because they're playing her record because
Yeah.
they didn't know she was coming. And he even asked her, like, "You want us to turn it off?" She's like, "No, you're playing my music in a record store.
Yeah.
Maybe someone would buy it. Who knows?"
Right. Before Marie DeSalle walks in, he has a phone call from Liz to talk about Laura. I don't really remember why she has to call him at work to talk about Laura, but she says
I don't know.
something like, "I don't think much of this Ian guy." So this is how Rob discovers that Laura has left him for a different guy.
Hmm. Yeah, in which she is, uh, in a Rob fashion, of course, is very obsessed about it.
Mhm.
Like
Well,
Marie DeSalle's in his store, which is cool, but he's just like, "What fucking Ian guy?" Like
yeah,
that's
like
all he's obsessing over.
he like walks away from Marie DeSalle to go back into his office to yell, "What fucking Ian guy?"
Yeah, and he's like trying to put it together. She doesn't know any Ian. What Ian does she know? Like she's not allowed to know anybody else besides Rob and his cronies at work, I guess.
Yeah.
But then kind of puts it together that Ian is Ray, who used to live above them.
Mhm. Their
I
upstairs neighbor,
forget if Ian or Ray is his middle name or vice versa, but he
something
somehow
like
puts
that.
together because he used to see his mail all the
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
So he made that connection, and he is just telling us that like they used to hear when they were in bed, they used to hear Ian like making love to whoever he would have upstairs with him,
Mhm.
and now of course Rob can sleep because he's imagining Ian and Laura being romantic with each other, and he just again is obsessing over something that he doesn't really know anything about.
Mhm.
He's scared because he was left for this is someone else that was left you left him for another person because of that
Mhm.
obsession. Laura actually does make to the top 5.
Yep. And then this is when after Rob is like, "All right, well, congrats, like you made it to the top 5, Laura." We cut to Liz walking into the store on a random day, yelling at Rob that he's a fucking asshole and just leaving.
Yeah, There's like a
Mhm.
little pause too. It's like the shot's held on her, like a
Mhm.
medium close up, and she's just like, "You fucking asshole," and she just stops, and then
Yep.
just about
Just
faces and marches out.
yeah, you think there's gonna be something else, but no.
Right.
An explanation maybe.
Well, we get it, but we get it through Rob, fourth wall again,
Mhm.
and he is explaining to us why he's an asshole, and it voiced over while they're showing us Laura and Liz having lunch, dinner somewhere at a restaurant together,
Mhm.
talking. And, I guess Liz is trying to be that mutual friend and just, I guess, kind of know the why. And Laura breaks it down that, so Rob tells us there's 1 to 4 potentially things that Laura had told Liz. One of them, which that Rob had once slept with somebody else while Laura was pregnant,
Mhm.
that the affair that was caused resulted in the termination of the pregnancy. Sometime later, Rob had borrowed a large sum of money and has yet to pay it back,
Mhm.
and or that Rob had told Laura he was unhappy in the relationship and it might have been looking around, for somebody else.
Mhm.
And he says, and as he's saying those things, we're seeing Liz react to obviously Laura telling her. So Laura had told
Mhm.
her all 4 of those things. It's a nice, I like the way it's seen set up. I like how it's cut. You're getting all the
Mhm.
information from Rob himself, which I think is important
Yeah.
for the audience because he's admitting that he is an asshole because he asks us if he did and said any of those things, and he admits that he had,
Mhm.
and finally kind of starting to see cracks in his armor that he might be noticing there's something maybe about him that's wrong. And he, after he tells us, he just has a little bit of a remorse look on his face, like as he's remembering these things that had happened, like, oh, I am an asshole, and maybe it's time we start thinking about being a grown-ass man and have some responsibilities in your life and not be a jerk to everybody.
So I'm gonna push back on that a little bit, just a little bit, because I do think you are mostly correct that he is realizing that a lot of this is not good. Because he does say something like, "Yes, I was an asshole." But then he defends himself a little bit and says that she supposedly tricked him into saying that he
Hmm.
was looking to date other people because she brought up that they were unhappy and said she thought about that too. He clarifies that he didn't know Laura was pregnant when he slept with someone else. And he also still did not know she was pregnant when he admitted to sleeping with someone else, kind of trying to maybe insinuate that he wouldn't have done these things if he had realized she was pregnant. But Laura decided not to tell him about the pregnancy because he had just cheated on her. I assume in that moment, Laura probably thought the relationship was over. So
Yes.
then he didn't know about the pregnancy or the abortion until much later when they were like back on good terms. And then he admits he didn't react well and felt that it wasn't, her situation to handle all by herself, that he had had no
Hmm.
input, ignoring the fact that he had just done something that really hurt her. But I do really like you said, I like how this whole scene is cut with Laura being at lunch with Liz, Liz reacting even though it's Rob talking to us and carrying us through all this information. But I like at the end how Liz says, "That's shocking. That is shocking." And
Hmm.
she says it
Yeah.
in such a matter-of-fact way that it feels like such an understatement to me. Because this is, like, a lot of information that we just find out that, like, really is pretty bad.
Yeah. And her perception of Rob might have been different up until now. And when you're getting
Mhm.
all this info dumped on you, I mean, it is shocking. That being said, now you don't need to defend any pushback. In fact, I'm pushing back your pushback. All I'm saying is the cracks have started. He
Yes.
does go back and kind of start to blame some of these things on Laura, but he makes excuses for himself.
Mhm, mhm,
But he still realizes that he had been the asshole. He's just not fully ready
mhm,
to admit it to us or himself yet. But the cracks are showing.
mhm,
And after he explains all these things, he just goes, well, who needs a drink? Then he starts phone calling his exes. It's the
mhm.
now we're talking about the exes again, starting at number one. Now it's the part of the movie where it's, what does this all mean? Why am I getting left? Because before,
Mhm.
1 through 5 was the situations told to us. Now Rob needs answers. Calls Allison's mom and finds out that she married Kevin, which was the guy under the bleachers after him.
Mhm.
And at first, it seems like I feel like he was going to take it bad because they got married. Like the next guy got married,
Yeah.
and he's trying to explain to Allison's mom that he was like he kind of like trying to die in this hill where like technically I was her first boyfriend. She's like, no, she married her first boyfriend Kevin. He's like, no, like, I was before Kevin. We made out before Kevin did, and he's like trying to die in the hill that he was technically the first boyfriend. So then he hangs up the phone,
Right.
and I feel like he was going to be more upset, but he's actually happy because he
Mhm.
says it wasn't him, it was fate. They were supposed to, Kevin and Allison
Mhm.
are supposed to get married, and that's why that happened. That's why he got broken up with, because fate intervened.
Yeah.
Lots
This
to be said there.
whole Yeah, I know. This whole scene is insane to me because it's one thing if he, like, wants to reach out, I don't know, even though I do think it's weird because they were 14. It's reasonable that she's not, like, living with her parents anymore, but then he just explains the situation to her mom, which is, like, insane, and obviously the mom thinks it's insane because she's pouring a glass of wine, and she's like, "Okay, goodbye, Bob. Bye now." Like,
Yeah.
she's weirded out. I don't think I would care about anything so much to push back on someone's parent and be like, "No, they dated me before this person." Like, I don't know.
Oh, but
Um,
that's the problem with Rob, though.
that is a problem with Rob, yes. Oh, also, this just would never happen, like, in the age of social media, you would just look them up on Facebook or
Yeah,
whatever,
I guess so. Yeah.
and you wouldn't even have to actually talk to them, you would just, like, stalk them online. I do like that bit when he gets off the phone and he yells, Allison married Kevin, and you think he's gonna be upset about it, but it's actually because this couldn't possibly have been his fault that they broke up. It was fate because this is the person she was supposed to end up with.
Right. So now he comes to the conclusion to call all of his exes because Bruce Springsteen tells him to.
Yeah,
That is
Bruce
not a
Springsteen
mess up.
shows up.
Yeah, Bruce Springsteen, the boss, is just in his
Mhm.
apartment playing guitar and kind of giving Rob some advice. And he's just like playing guitar casually, and
Yep.
Rob's. I mean, we're assuming in like if this was real life situation, Rob is just imagining Bruce Springsteen giving him advice for some reason.
Yes.
So thanks, boss.
Yeah, I like how he says, "Thanks, boss."
So now we get to Penny, and they actually meet up, and he talks about her a little bit. And I have in my notes that Penny is a catch. And I what I mean here is he remembers he broke up with her, and all these other relationships, it is Rob actually doing like getting broken up with, except for this situation because they were in high school and she wouldn't put out. But she like does movie reviews for a living. She
Mhm.
seems pretty cool, confident. She's attractive woman. Their other restaurant, and she ends up yelling at him, defending herself because Rob's asking like, why we break up, and she
Oh,
reminds him
why did
that
you leave me for that other guy too?
yeah,
Mhm.
that's what he asks, and she reminds him it was the other way around. It's like, you left me, and she kind of has this big spiel that Rob actually kind of messed her up in a way that he was pressuring her to sleep with him so much that the next guy came around. She ended up doing it because she was just kind of broken down into
Mhm.
thinking that's what was supposed to happen, and so much so that
Mhm.
like she hasn't had a physical relationship after that for such a long time. She admits to us, or to Rob,
Mhm.
I guess,
Yeah.
and she gets mad and walks away. And Rob's like, "Oh yeah, I broke up," and he's happy. He's like, "I broke up with her again." Like,
Mhm.
number one, I didn't get left for Kevin. That was fate. Number
Mhm.
two, I didn't get left for other
This
guy.
other
I,
guy.
I
Mhm.
I broke up with her. So right now he's betting 1,000 on not being some sort of bad person that is the reason people keep leaving him.
Mhm. Um, yeah, the whole situation with Penny just makes me so mad. It
Mm-hmm.
makes me hate Rob, honestly. The next guy that asked her out and made a move on her, the way she explains it, she was just, like, too tired to keep saying no, and she was like, "Well, I don't know, I guess this is what's expected of me," and she
Yeah.
even says, like, "You can't really call it rape because I didn't say no, but it's not like I really wanted to do it either," and that's, like, horrible, and it's such a heavy revelation, and Rob's just like, "Oh, that's another one I don't have to worry about. I should have done this years ago." And,
Yeah.
like, she ran away crying, and he's just like, "Oh,
But he
that's
feels better about
great."
himself.
But, yeah, generally, Rob takes very little from this. Like,
Right.
extremely little.
You as I felt the cracks were happening, but now I feel like maybe they're sealing back up because you want to push Rob in
Mhm.
the right direction,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
he needs to kind of start walking himself.
Exactly.
So after that, he goes down the list obviously, but he skips Charlie, I believe, right?
Yeah,
He's
he
not ready
says
to
he's,
make
like,
that.
not ready. Mhm.
Yeah, because she was the one. I mean, he's still obviously tore up by that.
Mhm.
So he skips Charlie and goes and calls Sarah.
Mhm.
They hang out, kind of have another like day date sort of thing that
Mhm.
they did with Penny, which was more of just like a kind of going down memory lane. And she had just gotten broken up with again,
I
right?
believe so. Mhm.
But she seems not like miserable, but she's not. She's like still getting over it,
Mhm.
and I feel like because of that, Rob is again feels better about himself because
Mhm.
the guy she was with, presumably it's the same guy after Rob, that didn't also work out.
Mhm.
So maybe it's
Yeah.
not Rob, it's Sarah type deal.
Yeah. And Rob basically just comes to the conclusion that she's too sad at the moment for him to have this big breakup conversation.
Right. Which I guess is nice. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, like but then he's also, like, very obviously pitying her because he makes a comment when he's leaving saying, like, "I totally could have slept with her because she's, like, in
Yeah.
this vulnerable state."
So he's feeling a little bit better about himself because,
Mhm.
obviously he's just a selfish person. And in his kind of feel good moment, does call and leave a voicemail for Charlie. I think he says something like, "Oh, she's probably off doing something in Spain, living this cool life that he's clearly afraid that she left him for because
Right.
he was a nobody and she's Charlie."
Mhm.
So while that's happening, there's these little punk rock kids in the corner that's shoving vinyls in their pants and under their shirt, and Rob sees
Mhm.
them and he's like, "Barry, get the door!" And everyone like runs out there and he's chasing
Mhm.
them, and
Mhm.
they drop their skateboard kids.
Mhm.
And Rob kind of negotiates the fact that it's like, how much did you steal from me? Is it worth as much as your board? And Laura shows up while Rob's closing up shop. She just
Mhm.
keeps showing up.
Yeah,
Um,
she just keeps showing up.
yeah, this is where I start to feel Laura's gravitating back to Rob, whether she knows
Mhm.
it herself yet or not. It
Yeah.
feels like this is a pattern, right? We've seen this pattern, and she's reluctant because Rob doesn't seem to be like a nice guy, at least not to us.
Yeah.
Laura might think differently, and we're not sure why.
Mhm. And yeah, like, even in this situation, she shows up to give him a ride home, again, under the excuse of, like, "There's stuff I wanna get out of the apartment."
Hmm.
And, like, she coulda just gone and done that, she didn't have to give him a ride home.
Yeah, it would probably been easier.
Yeah.
You'd have to wait for the bus and take the bus home and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
because then she would have known she had time in there without him.
So while they're there, Rob kind of confronts her about
Mhm.
Ian.
Yeah.
She kind of gives the impression that they're not exactly what she thought it would be. She doesn't say all that, but she's just kind of in her tone of saying how they're together. And
Mhm.
he asks about, because of course he does, ask about, is the sex better? And she
Mhm.
says, well, we haven't done that yet, but
Right.
sleeping next to him is better. And he doesn't care.
Like,
He's
"Whatever,
happy.
Laura."
She was trying to tell Rob that like, I have these feelings for him. We can just lie there and enjoy each other's company.
Mhm.
And it cuts to Rob leaving. Laura could do what she needs to do there without Rob, and he's celebrating that they
Mhm.
haven't slept together yet.
Mhm.
And then this motherfucker,
Mhm.
this hypocrisy of all hypocrisy, he
Yep.
feels so good that he goes finds Marie DeSalle and hooks up with her.
Yep.
Like every time, you want to defend Rob or just see his character change and see that Laura still likes him, and you're wondering why. Then he does
Mhm.
something stupid, like, God damn it, Rob.
Yep. Yeah, Rob is constantly like one step forward, two steps back. But yeah, he hooks up with Marie DeSalle. She's still really cool. I get it.
Right. The next morning, they're just kind of sitting around her apartment, and she kind of calls him out on he still has feelings for Laura, and they leave and they go their separate ways. And I think that's the last time we see her, Marie.
Yeah, I remember thinking that I had assumed she was going to be like a bigger part of this movie or something, especially since like she ended up being his rebound, but Laura keeps showing up too, so.
Yeah. I mean, the last thing they say to each other is he has to go to work and she has to go do something probably
Mhm.
cool because she's her. And Rob's like, "Oh, I'll call you," and she kind of is like, "Sure, you will."
Yeah, yeah.
And he does not obviously call her.
Right. Cut to Rob back at the store. And I guess he's talking with Dick and Barry about what it would mean that Laura hasn't slept with Ian yet. And like they get hung up on the word yet. And it turns into this conversation about like, if I had told you I hadn't seen Evil Dead 2 yet, like what would that mean to you? And
Hmm.
this thing just like this whole scene completely lost my interest. Like he's already slept with someone else now, and he's still obsessing over this.
Hmm. It's funny because Jack Black is now he's kind of playing a little bit more of a straight character in this scene. He's still
Mhm.
goofy and yells, but he yells at Rob saying like, "Why I would call you stupid if you haven't seen Evil Dead 2 yet because it's an awesome film." And so Barry's just not getting the situation, but then finally he like light bulbs moments and says, "Oh, but yet it sounds like you haven't got around to doing it, but you will."
Mhm.
And of course, that's not what Rob wants to hear. And
Mhm.
then I have just a dumb complaint about this scene because the way they describe Evil Dead 2, it is clearly Army of Darkness, which is the third movie in that trilogy. Because
I
they
didn't
talk about like,
even pick up on that.
well, they talk about like shotgun shells in 14th century. Like that's when he goes back in time. Was the Army of
Mm,
Darkness. But anyway,
okay.
that's I just figured I'd point it out because we're talking about a bunch of music elitists, and I want to say they made a bad movie
They made a really
reference.
big mistake there, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, how about that, Barry? Anyway, on to more serious things. Rob calls Laura and asks them to meet for a drink,
Mhm.
and I feel like I'm like, why are you saying yes to this? Like,
Yeah. And, like, was the whole point to ask her if she had slept with Ian yet?
yeah, just asking her that
Like,
again.
how awkward.
Yeah. Well, he's not emotionally healthy or stable, clearly,
Yeah.
and it's all about him. But it's also clear that she still cares about him. Otherwise, I don't think she would make much of an effort both
Yeah.
before they broken up and somehow now. Like again, she shows up a lot. Yeah, she's getting her things, but she seems to be kind of doing a lot of checking in on Rob.
Yeah.
Probably because she knows he's emotionally unstable.
Rob finding Ian's address and calling Laura at Ian's from a payphone, like, right outside their place. Like, is he in
In
the
the
rain
rain.
again? Yeah.
Yep. It's a lot of rain for this poor man.
Yep. I mean,
He's getting
he could just go home. He keeps putting
this is
himself in.
this is true, yeah.
Yeah.
He keeps putting himself in the rain, I guess.
Mhm.
So while Rob is outside in the rain, again, he's calling repeatedly and getting hung up on. Ian's just picking up and hanging up real quick, knowing that it's Rob pestering them.
Mhm.
One of the times, Laura decides to pick up the phone and she realizes he's outside the apartment because she can hear the rain
Mhm.
and
Or, like,
whatnot.
sirens or something.
Yeah, the rain first, and there's some sort of siren in the background. She looks out the window and sees him standing there in the rain at the payphone. And I feel like she asked him if he's okay, even though it's a situation where it's the other way around.
Mhm.
And then also asks why he even wants her back. What's the deal here?
Mhm.
And he doesn't really have an answer.
Yeah, which is interesting.
So he's back at work where he gets all his. He's either making phone calls in the rain or he's at work getting phone calls.
Also makes phone calls at work.
Yeah, which is fine. I'm not saying you can't do it. It just seems like there's a lot of important conversations in the back office at the record shop.
Yep.
Charlie calls though,
Mhm.
and he is surprised actually
Mhm.
that she called back, and she said something like, "Well, you told me to." It's like a
Mhm.
very just like, you called and I called back, and they kind of do a "How are you doing" type thing over the phone very briefly, and she is like, "Oh my god, like, you're not doing one of those. What does it all mean? Rehash the past type deal." And of
Mhm.
course, he denies it,
Right.
and it's almost Charlie's not breaking the fourth wall by talking directly to the audience, but she's like talking for the audience, I feel. And she had mentioned to Rob that she was just with like someone else from her past reached out, and that's exactly what he was doing also.
I think it
And
was the
so
guy that she left Rob for.
I think so. I
Mhm.
think that makes sense.
Mhm.
So he of course denies it, and they chit chat a little bit more, and she invites him over for dinner,
To a
right?
dinner party.
And as always, Rob thinks that everyone there is just above him. He's not cool enough to
Mhm.
be there.
Mhm.
And so this is kind of a weird thing with Rob is he's has these attributes that we clearly don't like about him.
Mhm.
And he does seem very self-absorbed. But yet when it comes to Charlie and Charlie's peers, he feels down about himself, like he's not good enough. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a weird it flips.
I don't know if he ever felt like that confident in himself though in any of his relationships, but with Charlie specifically it stood out.
I mean, she's cool, I guess, but I don't
Yeah.
know. She also seems kind of annoying.
Yeah, I think we realize she's kind of annoying and maybe a little full of herself, maybe one of those people that just likes to hear themselves talk. I think she just has more confidence. And so she comes off as like so witty and smart and social, and he's just not necessarily like that, or at least he doesn't think of himself like that.
Right. But at the dinner party, he's slowly kind of realizing that maybe Charlie doesn't need to be on this pedestal after all.
Yeah. So this confused me because, like, yes, I agree she doesn't have to be on this pedestal, but he says something like, I realize that Charlie's awful. And
Hmm.
I just don't know what she did that we're going all the way to awful.
He gives some opinions. He gives opinions about I think what you said, she just talks to hear herself talk, that she's not funny. She just kind of talks shit about people, things like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
But actually, before we forgot to mention, before this, Ian comes to the store
Mhm.
to confront him
Yes.
about like,
Calling
why
too
the
much.
why are you calling my house in
Mhm.
the rain all the time? Um,
In the rain.
yeah, and then it's like they do these mock confrontations. Obviously, Rob is just using his imagination, and he's throwing insults at Ian,
Mhm.
or they're attacking Ian,
Mhm.
or he's trying to fight him, but his coworkers are keeping him back. Just little things like that. He's clearly feeling a certain way.
Imagining how he would like to
Right.
react to Ian, yeah.
Yeah. My favorite scenario that he imagined is when Dick, of all people, the quiet, sensitive guy, grabs an old school like rotary phone and just smashes him in the face, and like
Mhm.
clearly there's chiclets that are flying out there his teeth,
Yeah.
and then they just all beat him up, and then again Dick is the one that like picks up like a trash can or something and just like smashes his head with it. So that happens, and we're at the party, and yeah, this is where Rob just realizes he doesn't like Charlie anymore. He doesn't know why he was so obsessed,
Mhm.
because of all the reasons we said earlier.
I do think it's interesting that when everyone leaves, Rob asks Charlie, like, "So why'd you dump me?" Because
Hmm.
I think maybe the spell's been broken a little bit. He doesn't really care what she thinks, that he's just gonna go ahead and ask, and I like her reaction when she's like, "I knew it!" Like, she's like, "Everyone's going through this phase of what does it all mean?" But then she says that the guy she left him for was glamorous, less hard work, and I wonder if she means that he's was, like, less of a sad sack, because I can't help feeling like this is kinda what Rob is all the time, like, very woe is me, like,
Yeah,
everything apparently happens to him, he couldn't possibly be the cause of anything, or there was nothing he could have ever done to make a situation better. nothing's ever his fault. This is why he's going back and asking all these women, like, "Why did you leave
Right.
me?"
Yeah.
I guess we just cut back to the record store,
Yep.
and
We're always at the record store.
someone's asking Barry about an ad looking to form a band, and apparently, like, Barry's had that flyer hanging up for a really long time.
Yeah, it's they kind of are making fun of him.
Mhm.
And we also see that Dick can't hang out with them afterwards because he has a date.
Mhm.
Barry's making fun of Dick, but it seems more out of in good jest than
Mhm.
meanness. And I don't know, it kind of shows a little bit of these two characters growing. They know other people outside of the store.
Yeah. They know
And
people outside the store.
yeah.
Well,
And even
Dick
even the way Barry's making fun of Dick, he's doing it more out of friendship, just kind of like ribbing him and not picking on him,
Mhm.
if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, and Dick is going on a date with the girl he met at the record store, the one that
Yeah,
he was
the
talking about Green Day with.
Green Day, yeah.
Yeah.
So then Rob leaves work and goes home.
Mhm.
And who's there? Anyone have a guess?
Yeah.
Laura's there, and she's there to get the rest of her stuff. She says it's the last trip, but she's just sitting at the kitchen table
Mhm.
reading like Rob's personal notes to himself, like
Right?
kind of invasion of privacy in a weird way, but hey, whatever.
Mhm.
And it's what she's reading is Rob's his top 5 dream jobs.
Mhm.
And he even, in fact, even like kind of shouts at her, "Is like, hey, that's private," and she doesn't care. She just reads them out loud anyways.
Mhm. Yeah, like a journalist for Rolling Stone, but between certain years.
Executive at a very famous record label, but then again, certain years in both situations, he mentions he would be meeting and talking to these really famous, cool bands that
Yeah.
we know today. A film director,
Any film
um,
except German or silent is what he
right,
puts. Like, he would just accidentally end up directing German or silent films.
right. And then whatever the other one is doesn't matter. Then the number 5 was an architect,
Mhm.
and which out of all these crazy jobs, architect seems out of place here for Rob based on all these other weird wants and goals. And I say weird because like some and that Laura points out that
Mhm.
time and space and history, if that weren't an issue, what job would you pick?
Mhm.
So then Laura crosses out architect
Mhm.
and puts owning my own record store,
Mhm.
and then they check it off.
Mhm.
So it's again, we see these little flashes of Laura still being supportive, still
Right.
having feelings for him, trying to make him feel better about himself, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
But then, of course, Rob self sabotages again and kind of ruins this little moment because he asks about Ray or is it Ian? And she says, "It's Ian. I hate Ray." And he goes, "I hate him too."
Yeah, I thought that was funny. So we cut to Rob making a list of the things he likes about Laura.
Yeah. So we kind of see that he realizes he still has feelings for her,
Mhm.
obviously. And this is kind of more of a softer approach to Rob, I feel.
Mhm. Well, and also we had that scene earlier with Liz where she was like, "Why do you even want Laura back so bad?" And
Hmm.
he couldn't even answer it, but now he's like, "Okay, here are the top 5 things I miss about Laura."
Yeah. He mentions like her smell and taste, but it's beyond like the physical stuff. He basically equates to like some people just feel like home.
Mhm.
And yeah, I kind of always like that line and just the ideal of that, like of someone being so important to you that
Mhm.
it's home is where the heart is, right?
Right. No, I
And
just thought that was very sweet, which is not something we see from Rob a lot.
no, he has a wall of bullshit up all time. I don't know what else to say because there's a lot wrong with Rob. He goes back to work and he comes across the skateboarder kids. They're skateboarding like the alley adjacent to
Mhm.
his store or whatever.
Mhm.
And there's some music playing as always in the record stop, but something he's not familiar with. And
Mhm.
he asks who it was, and they say the name of the band. I forget what the name is, but then they say it's the kids outside, and
Yeah.
all three of them agree that it's like really good.
And they're, like, mad about it because the
Right,
kids
right,
they don't like these kids.
right. And so then Rob goes out there and out of nowhere is like, I'm gonna put out your record. It's not
Mhm.
like you stole from me a week ago, but I'm going to front the money for you to record an album.
Mhm. Doesn't even
Um,
have a record label, by the way.
they don't need to know that.
Yeah, no. Tiny
Um,
little detail.
but poor Barry gets a little upset because he's been talking about music and being in a band for years, and
Mhm.
on a very brief interaction with their music and on a whim, he decides to take a bunch of money and invest it in these kids.
And his record label is called Top 5 Records,
Right, of course it
which
is.
he thinks about right off the bat when the kids ask.
I believe this next phone conversation is yet again in the back office,
Yep.
and Laura calls to let Rob know her father just passed away.
Yes. Okay. Obviously, this is horrible. But he comes out of his office and says that Laura's dad died, and Barry goes, "Oh, drag."
Yeah, Barry's. I feel like he's doing something, and he's kind of like flipping through a magazine or whatever. So he's. I feel
Mhm.
like he's not fully paying attention, but also Barry doesn't really know how to empathize with people. I don't think.
No, I don't think he does.
Well,
Um,
I guess he does in his own way because then they are having a conversation. This is probably more for Rob than Laura, but they do like
mhm.
the top 5 songs about death or whatever that they would play
Right.
at Laura's dad's funeral.
Yeah, Laura's dad tribute list is what I have in my notes.
Rob was asked to go to the funeral because his dad always liked Rob, and he, of course, asked if Ian's going,
Mhm.
which he is not, but of course he had to ask.
I always thought it was so funny that Laura sounds so shocked that Rob would even think that Ian would be there. Like, why wouldn't the guy you're currently dating be at your dad's funeral? Like, if nothing else but for moral support, even if he hadn't met
Right,
your parents yet. And that's definitely, to me, our clue that this isn't like an important relationship for Laura.
right.
It's just like this guy was there at the time, I guess.
We're at the funeral, and well, it's the after funeral I'm thinking of, and at the house.
Hmm.
And Liz is talking to, I think that's Laura's sister, possibly,
Yeah, I think so.
and just kind of, it seems like she may or may not be throwing some shade at Rob.
Oh, I think she is.
She claims she isn't, but it very much feels like she was.
Hmm.
So Rob gets
Yeah.
upset and leaves, but he says goodbye to Laura when he leaves, and he does it in such a like a kind of like a weird, simple way that she gives him this like curious look. She's just like, I'm sorry, and I'm gonna go by, and she's just like longingly staring at him,
Yeah,
like
like
he just
maybe
did
she didn't
something so simple,
Mhm.
but it was somehow more meaningful. He didn't put on a
Exactly.
big show.
I also read that too as she didn't really want him to go yet. I did want to point out though, during the little bit we see of the funeral, Rob is sitting in the back talking about how he always imagined some like beautiful, tearful woman would sing a song about him at his funeral. And like for someone who we've already said has like confidence issues and kind of doesn't think a lot of himself sometimes, he also is like very full of himself
Yeah.
in different ways, and it kind of bothered me that he's like this is what's on his mind while he's at this funeral, but then
Hmm.
we see Laura really break down sobbing, and we then cut to see that Rob is crying. We assume, I guess, because of how upset Laura is.
It's just cool because we're finally seeing Rob maybe care about someone other than Rob. So he leaves, and the weather outside is being very weather,
The
and
weather outside
is
is weather.
yeah, and it's raining again. He's getting soaking wet.
And it's so much worse this time too because
Oh,
he
it's
ends up in a flower bed and he's like so dirty.
yeah. Well, he ends up in the flower bed because he's sitting at a bus station and or a bus bench. There's no station,
Mhm.
so he's getting rained on.
Yeah.
And Laura's car comes around, and she's
Mhm.
clearly looking for him. And he's like trying to hide behind his jacket. Then he hides behind the bench, and then he just jumps this like mini fence into the flower bed. And she sees him
Yeah.
anyways, and asks if he's going to stay the whole night in the flower bed or if he wants to
Mhm.
ride home.
Yeah. And as they're having this discussion, like he does eventually stand up and like he's leaning on the fence with his hands. And every time you cut back to him, like more mud is running off of him.
Yeah,
Ugh. I don't know if I would let him in my car in that state, but that's
I mean, 2 more seconds in that rain, I'm sure he'll be clean.
yeah, it's fair.
It's coming down pretty hard.
Yep.
So they go for a ride, and I don't know, they're like in a park or something. And I guess
Yeah.
Laura's dad used to just bring them to this area. So
Mhm.
it reminds her of him. And then she
Mhm.
gives him a random request. Oh, I feel a weird request
Mhm.
for both where they're at and not, I guess maybe the where, but because it reminds her of her dad, but just their relationship right
Yeah.
now in this film. And she's like, I need you to do me a favor. Can you have sex with me?
Mhm.
And he's like, what?
Yeah.
And would she say something like, I want to feel
Mhm.
anything other than this, like her
Yeah, like how
sadness.
sad she is. Mhm.
Yeah. And as Rob is kind of thinking it over, she's like, well, do you want to, you can always just put cigarettes out in my arm if that's, a better option. And he makes a joke that he only has a couple left and he was saving them for later.
Yeah.
Meaning, meaning he's like, yeah, I'll have sex with you.
Yes.
But also, those cigarettes are soaking wet and muddy. They're not going to light. Come on.
Oh, yeah.
Drives Laura back home
Mhm.
to her mom's, and her
Yeah.
mom kind of looks out to the car, kind of almost I feel like it was approvingly, like she's like, okay, this is, Laura obviously, Rob means something to her, and her mom must think that as well, I guess.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how to read her mom, but her mom was the one that asked him to be there, so.
So she's going in the house to get some things because she wants to stay with Rob that
Mhm.
night.
She
Oh, go ahead.
says, like, "I just wanna go home with you."
The one line she said is, I'm too tired not to be with you.
Yeah, which that's how she starts it, by saying, "I'm too
Right.
tired not to be with you," which, I mean, can't necessarily make him feel great, and she has to realize that's, like, not, like, a ringing endorsement, and he says, like, "Well, so you're saying we would stay split up if you had more energy?" And she says, "Yeah." And she says, "Ian is a disaster," and it's just very, like, "I'm just gonna slide back into this because I don't have the energy for anything else." But then she says, "I just wanna go home with you." And I almost feel like if she had started with that, I would feel better about this because, like, she could have very well realized that, like, she misses being with Rob. She wants to go back to their place together that is home to her, but she doesn't start it with that.
No, no. It's
Mhm.
kind of a backhanded compliment, I guess, in a way.
Definitely.
So while she's out of the car, Rob looks very confused, but also accepting of this. Like,
Mhm.
okay, he probably also feels like he deserved that, that little bit of kind of poking at him. But we gotta kind of get a little bit of a montage voiceover action of them being together and
Mhm.
things are good, like better than they were before,
Mhm.
which is great.
Yeah.
We're happy for them, right? Until a female journalist comes in looking for Rob at the record
Mhm.
store,
Mhm.
and Rob's kind of flirting with her a little
Yeah.
bit. And I do love that the phone call, of course, happens. Barry picks it up in the office, and he's yelling to Rob, "He's like, you got a phone call, Rob." He's like, "Someone take a message." Like, it's your girlfriend. I was like, "Ooh,
Yeah.
C blocked. Good job,
Yep.
Barry."
Yeah.
Barry to the rescue.
So there's little window into showing that Rob is still maybe, like, distracted by, shiny new things.
Yeah.
And then there's also the issue of Laura planning his DJ return at the release party for the skate kids, and
Right.
he without him knowing.
Yeah. So yeah, she's definitely pushing him into something Rob wants to be, but he doesn't know he wants to be this, or is reluctant to change because he
Reluctant
is
to take the steps necessary, I
right.
guess.
So he
Yeah.
has to be pushed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also is revealed that Barry's band that just formed is opening
Mhm.
for these kids' bands.
Yeah.
And at the store, he's literally bribing Barry to not show up. He's like, I'll give you all of the money. It starts at like 10% at the door, but then it goes up to like 120% or something like that. Like Rob will go in debt giving Barry money. And
Right.
and Barry's like, nope, we're playing a show because we're the Sonic fucking Death Monkeys.
Yep.
And he's just so confident that he's playing the show. He doesn't care how much money is offered. He's like, no, we need the gig. We need exposure. I
Mhm.
still think he feels a little slighted that, they asked these kids to be on his record label he doesn't have yet and not Barry.
Mhm.
So he's going to play regardless of what Rob says. He ends up doing a phone interview with this lady who works at a music magazine or some sort of journalist, and
Mhm. The one that was at the store earlier that he was
yeah,
kind
that
of
he was
flirting with.
kind of hitting on, yeah.
Mhm.
And he's doing it a little bit less on the phone.
Mhm.
Really not at all until he gets to the part where he wants to make her a mixtape.
Right.
You're like, oh, come on, man. Like, what are you
Yeah.
doing?
I did like the phrase he uses for himself, a professional appreciator, which I feel like is a little douchey the way he's using it, but I also like understand the feeling of like really like movies. I just want to talk about movies with someone else who also really likes movies.
Welcome to our podcast.
Yeah,
uh, I mean, I'm having fun.
good.
But yeah, I mean, I wish I could be a professional appreciator. Like you said, he just kind of says it in a douchey way because he says it about himself. But I wish that
Right,
was a job I could do.
right, right.
He comes home and Laura sees he's making a mixtape. He's like, "Oh, what's that for?" He's like, "Oh, some girl," and she's like, "Okay, some columnist girl." She
Yeah.
kind of seems to like not even be paying attention or shrugging it off.
Mhm. But it's
And
almost like, oh, this is the thing that Rob does. He always has like one foot out the door or whatever, and
yeah. Well, even when he's telling her, he's kind of like squinting eye at her. He's trying to read her reaction. He's almost like trying to poke the bear to see how she would
mhm.
react, maybe. I don't know. And that kind of
Yeah.
leads to him calling her to have lunch.
Mhm.
And he, maybe not the most romantic way possible, but explains that he realizes that he has been that person that's the shiny
Mhm.
new object, like you just said,
Mhm.
and he doesn't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
He's comfortable with Laura. He says things incorrectly in a way that I think she understands,
Yeah.
but he doesn't really. He's not the romantic type, I suppose. He doesn't come
Mhm.
out and say that he loves her and cares about her, but that he
Well, he
never
says
seems to get tired of you, is what he says.
yeah, and this could have been really sweet if he had, like, said it better.
Right?
But,
Yeah.
he does say something like he's tired of the fantasy because he's always thinking it's gonna be, like, better or more exciting or more interesting with, like, a new girl, but he says there's never any surprises and it never really delivers, and despite him always thinking, like, something new is what he needs, he tells her, "I never seem to get tired of you," which again is a sweet sentiment in a way. But yeah, like I couldn't help feeling that he's recognizing that he has this problem where he like gets bored and complacent and like goes and chases like the next thing. And that's good, obviously, that he realizes his faults, but
Hmm.
it's still I can't help feeling like it sounds a little bit like he's just settling for Laura because, like, the new girls are never good enough or it's never like what I want, so might as well just stay with you.
Yeah, I guess that vibe is there too. I just think
Mhm.
he's really bad at emoting,
I mean, yes,
and
I agree with you on that too.
yeah,
Mhm.
I don't know. Maybe the hopeless romantic in me just really wants him to have been turned around, and just he doesn't know how to express it. And it's
Mhm.
not. I don't want Laura to be the consolation prize. I don't want that for
Right,
her.
yeah. Mhm.
So then we end the movie with they do the record release party for the kids. Rob is DJing, and he introduces Barry's band, who I think have changed names 3 times since in like 30 seconds. They are no longer the Sonic Death Monkey. There's something else, but for tonight, Barry says that they are going to be Barry Jive and the Youngtown Five.
Yeah.
And there was another name in between. I don't know.
Mhm. Like, they're still
And
trying to make their final decision.
right, they're figuring themselves out. They've been a band for what it was either a day or a week. I can't tell.
Mhm.
And Rob is just so paranoid that everyone's going to leave. He's like, we should have played the kids' record first, and then they can just leave and all this
Right.
stuff.
Yeah, like, no one's gonna stay to hear the actual release record.
Right.
Yeah.
And to everyone's surprise, kind of like the Peter Frampton moment where there was a really cool cover. They start playing Marvin Gaye, "Let's Get It
Mhm.
On,"
Mhm.
and if you haven't known at this point through Tenacious D that Jack Black can sing,
Mhm.
you know now. He
Right.
does a really good job here.
Mhm.
I do like that, and again, I think I've never noticed this without taking notes. He's doing a Marvin Gaye song earlier in the film. Rob and Laura are talking about, I think it's when she's in the house reading his top 5 dream jobs. that like Marvin Gaye was like the catalyst of the relationship, and she's like, "Oh, we have to have a word with him," like, jokingly, like, "Well, our
Mhm.
relationship isn't that great." So
Yeah.
I kind of like this little throwback here, and also just being able to hear Barry belt out some
Mhm.
chords is kind of cool.
Yeah, I love how the camera's showing everyone's, like, completely shocked faces that Barry can sing, and then also the skater guys are in the back, like, shoving albums, like, in their pants again.
Yeah, well, they're punk kids.
Yeah,
They're
you
gonna do
know.
what they got to do. And at the very, very end, Rob's back where we found him at the beginning, on the floor, playing records with his headset on. He's now making a mixtape for Laura.
Mhm.
Making a tape is complicated. You have to do all these, certain things to keep the momentum of the tape going. But I think the
Mhm.
biggest takeaway here is he's making a mixtape for Laura, not in what he thinks songs he wants to have her listen to, but in what she would like to hear.
Mhm. Songs that would
It,
make Laura happy.
yeah, it's about Laura,
Mhm.
not about Rob.
Yeah. So, other thoughts about High Fidelity? I know this was based on a book by Nick Hornsby, and in the book, which I have read, it takes place in London. Nick Hornsby is a British writer, and on that note, the director, Stephen Frears, a British director. It's funny, I like a lot of his other movies, but they're kind of, I guess, what I would call old people British films, for lack of a better way to say it. He directed things like The Queen, which is about Queen Elizabeth II during the period after Princess Diana died.
Oh,
The Lost King, about basically an older woman, her kids are grown up, she starts researching the lost burial place of, I think it's like Richard III. It's a true story. She basically found his bones under a parking lot in England.
what?
I
Jeez.
know. No one had ever been able to locate his burial spot, and there was like a Richard III society, and they've correctly guessed, I get, like, they had proof, they had figured out, but they had to hire their own, like, construction crew and stuff. Victoria and Abdul, which is about very elderly Queen Victoria, she kind of struck up a friendship with an Indian man who, I don't know if he was working in the palace or what, but his name was Abdul. Movies concerning old British people is what I would consider like Stephen Frears' wheelhouse.
Kind of
So
curious as how he switched gears here.
right. I don't know. That's just what he fell into. So did the movie hold up for you?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think for the most part it did. There are some things we discussed that are a little rough around the edges. Rob specifically, you want to root for him. You do, but then you want him to fail because he's such an asshat. And I just think it's a very slow climb to realization that he needs to change who he is, not at the core, but just kind of
Mhm.
as he has gotten older from 14 to I don't know what he is at the end of the movie. We'll say 30 something.
Yeah.
That, his outlook at life has to change, specifically so, like, what a relationship with a woman looks like,
Mhm.
right? You said it best, one step forward, 20 steps back.
Yeah.
But I feel like at the end, we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. As you've mentioned before with rom coms, you kind of want to see where this goes. Is he and Laura going to be happy together? I'm
Mhm.
hoping. I'm hoping for the
Yeah.
best here. Jack Black still holds up. We've mentioned that. He's, again, a lovable dick, but the scenes
Mhm.
he is in are always fun and funny. It's
Mhm.
somehow, it seems almost acceptable more for him to act the way he does
Yeah.
than Rob. I don't know. It's weird. Maybe because Rob's the main character and Barry's a little bit of a funny sidekick comedy kind of relief.
I I don't think we expect as much from Barry, just how he is, but also we
Yeah.
don't really see him interacting with, we don't see his interpersonal relationships the way we see with Rob, so
Yeah.
it's
True.
different too. We don't have as much to criticize Barry for because we just don't see it.
That's a fair point. Like I said, there's some parts where I just want to grab him by the collar and shake him a little bit. But
Yes. Yeah, that was my big takeaway as well. In terms of like the difference in watching this now versus when I was younger. Um, I was really struck by how mean this movie is toward the women in Rob's life, which I hate saying because like I really enjoy this movie. I love John Cusack. I love Nick Hornby as an author. I think it just hit me differently as I mean, as a woman, obviously, but as an older person now who has like gone through relationships and been married a long time, like, but of course, maybe part of that is also Rob's growing process because even he realizes that he's been an asshole. So, but, especially some of the commentary on like women don't ever wear their nice underwear anymore when they get into a relationship. Like some of it just felt so gross, I guess.
Hmm.
You root for Rob, obviously, to make some changes, see the error of his ways, kind of like what you were saying. It just struck me how cruel some of it was watching back. And again, like everything else, maybe because we were taking notes on it too.
Right. I feel like some of it might have been cruel, and some of it, I think, is his way, and not defending it, but his way of
Mhm.
rationalizing things. The talking about the fancy underwear versus the regular underwear. I feel well, first of all, I think it's funny because I think everyone does it, underwear or not. When you're in a new relationship, you're kind of putting your best foot forward.
Yeah, of
And if it
course.
comes time to like the romantic, capital R romantic in the bedroom, uh, yeah, you're probably gonna wear something impressive. I get that, and he wants all of the new flashy things. He's like a
Hmm.
child at Toys R Us, and then later he talks about how he doesn't want that anymore. He wants Laura's old underwear, which
Yeah.
again, he's making this dumb metaphor, and he's what he's saying is kind of cutting into what he probably means, where he wants to
Hmm.
be able to grow old with someone and be
Hmm.
comfortable with them,
Yeah.
despite their fancy underwear or not. And I get what he's saying. It's just, yeah, maybe because how he's been acting,
Yeah.
what he says is being lost on how he's saying it.
I could agree with that, definitely. Like, he's very much and he even says this, every time he gets comfortable in a relationship, he kind of self-sabotages because he misses the exciting part, like the kind of the honeymoon part.
Hmm.
What do they call it? The honeymoon phase where you first get together and everything's new and exciting. And once things kind of settle down and they're more monotonous, he gets antsy, which again is understandable and part of growing up and whatever. But yeah, the way he talks about it is, I was shocked at how crude it all seemed. I don't remember it being that shocking to me when I was
Hmm.
younger, but maybe I was just an emotional teenager who knew what it felt like to get dumped. And
Fair
they're
enough. Yeah.
they're a bad person because they dump you the end. Like
Yeah. And I
there's
think,
no like self-reflection. But the
yeah, and
problem is that
I
Rob is
think,
not a teenager anymore.
well, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No more making out under the bleachers, right?
Right.
I think, though, the difference between the main characters, Rob and Peter, is
Hmm.
I feel Peter, when he's dumped, is a little more self reflective and on the defensive, where
Hmm.
Rob is more like scorch the earth offensive.
Yeah.
Like even when he dumps someone, he's like, "Well, fuck them. Like it's their fault, their problem, blah blah blah."
Yeah.
Peter takes everything so seriously. In fact, like people make fun of him for being sensitive.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
they react very differently.
Yeah, they definitely react differently. I like that you said scorched earth for Rob because I think that's true. Peter kind of like throws himself this pity party,
Hmm.
and rightfully so to some extent, but kind of going through all the things that Sarah did wrong in the relationship before coming to his own realization that maybe there were some things he could have done better too.
Right.
And that is something, that we had talked about wanting to touch on that in both of these movies, both main characters, both male main characters, kind of go on this journey of self-reflection. And yes, there's still anger and again, rightfully so to some extent, but I like that they both kind of have this journey of self-realization and some growing and changing and realizing that maybe they weren't always perfect in their relationships either. And I feel like both of them at the end of each movie have a better sense of how to be in a healthier relationship moving forward.
One would hope.
One would hope, especially Rob, like, geez.
Well, you know.
I also wanted to point out too how each movie is such a perfect microcosm of the time in which it was made in terms of like pop culture and tech and the guys at the record store in High Fidelity, their references, just even like the skateboarding outside the record store feels so 90s.
Oh yeah.
And then like in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, the Access Hollywood, the social media, that even the type of rock star that Aldous Snow is so of a time. And it's also sad and funny that now Forgetting Sarah Marshall feels like a blast from the past because that was our youth.
Yeah. Oof.
Yep.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on our movie picks as well as your own favorite breakup movies. You can find us on Instagram at Back Through the Lens Pod and on Facebook at Back Through the Lens. You can also email us at backthroughthelenspodcast@gmail.com. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review. It's the best way to support our show.
If you enjoyed our show today, please give us a like and follow for updates on new and future episodes. Our show is produced by our hosts, Rachel Campbell and myself, Joe Sielmick, with additional help and support from Peter Telep of LPV Productions. Rachel, Peter, and I are also the executive producers. Our awesome logo is brought to you by Tom Faracci, and our wonderful theme song is by Matt Tarek. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more trips into our movie watching past on Back Through the Lens.
We're taking next week off because Joe has to watch too much TV.
Yeah, we'll start with a break right now. We're gonna have a break, and we'll come back with my pick. That's how you do a transition.